Chapter 316. I'd like to see how capable you samurai descendants are, Li Fengyuan said coldly. He waved his hand and shouted angrily. Kill! Kill! In an instant those who followed Li Fengyuan rushed out, including Yuan Cheng. In an instant, more than 20 people rushed toward Jianglu and the others with majestic auras. Kill! Wakako was the first to rush out. His severed arm had been reconstructed. He opened his fists wide, and the fist aura was like a purple dragon rushing out. Jianglu followed closely behind. His strong body was like a human-shaped dragon. After rushing into the crowd, his fists and palms collided and pushed out. Tu Qiong stood in the distance, his hands constantly moving. 7 types of spells rained down like a storm. The shepherd god stood at the back with a smile on his face. The staff in his hand flickered with multicolored light, sprinkling down on Jianglu and the others. In an instant, Jianglu and Wakako completely gave up on defense. Their attacks were bold and fierce. One was the heavenly tyrant body, and the other was the immemorial sacred body. Their bodies were extremely strong. Now, with the shepherd god's blessing and healing, the two of them were almost invincible. Allowing the attacks to land on their bodies, Ruo Xiao and Jianglu remained unmoved. Even the injuries they suffered were healed in an instant. Kill that shepherd god! Li Fengyuan didn't make a move. Instead, he ordered the few dark masters around him. In his eyes, he didn't need to do anything to deal with Jianglu and the others. Whoosh! However, at this moment, a snow-white sword aura shot from a distance like a shocking blow and directly pierced Yuan Cheng's forehead. Li Fengyuan focused his eyes and looked into the distance. He saw Jiangchen holding a sharp sword and walking in the air. Jiangchen from Qianzuan sect? Jiangchen whispered. He looked around and finally locked his eyes on Xiao Wangyu in the crowd. Next to Xiao Wangyu was one-armed from Sword Gate Pass and the group of people who wanted to kill Jiang Yueli in the Sword Catacomb. These people had joined forces. After all, it was very difficult to obtain anything by himself in the main hall. In fact, it was very likely that he would be killed. I'm here for them, Jiangchen said softly, ignoring Li Fengyuan as he charged towards Xiao Wangyu and the others. Jiangchen! This was the main palace! No one will help you! Xiao Wangyu shouted angrily. You're just an exalted realm cultivator. Do you really think you can go against us? You'll know when you try, Jiangchen said softly. His figure had already rushed in front of Xiao Wangyu. In an instant, everyone saw a sword beam rise into the sky like a white lightning snake, and sword flowers bloomed. With one slash, the sky and earth changed color. The white sword in Jiangchen's hand was like a living creature, dancing gracefully. 9 Heavens Sword Dance! Accompanied by a long roar, Jiangchen's body danced and the sword beams slashed out in a dazzling manner. Like a huge net, it enveloped Xiao Wangyu. In terms of sword Dao, I'm not weaker than anyone. Xiao Wangyu was arrogant as he slashed out 18 times with the sword in his hand. The 18 sword beams were like dragons, swallowing and spitting out rays of light. Sword will erupted like an invisible gale, whistling and wantonly. The sword net was cut into pieces. The 18 sword beams were like a hot knife through butter, heading straight for Jiangchen. However, at this moment, Jiangchen was dancing like a banished immortal. Around him, above his head, and even above the clouds, sword flowers formed. The sword flowers fluttered and fell. However, at that moment, the sword flowers collapsed. It was like a flower blooming and withering, and all other flowers were defeated. The 18 sword beams disappeared along with it. Poof! In the next moment, before everyone could react, Jiangchen moved horizontally in front of Xiao Wangyu. He raised the sword in his hand high, and then gently slashed it down. Bestowment Liberation. With a soft shout, the snow-white sword slashed down. The protective spiritual energy on Xiao Wangyu's body was slashed apart as if it was nothing. Then, an arrow pierced through Xiao Wangyu's heart and his chest exploded. Sword chi rose wantonly in his body. In just 3 breaths' time, Xiao Wangyu's body collapsed, and he died on the spot. When Sword Gate Guan and the rest saw this, they no longer had the courage to fight Jiang Qin. They retreated and fled into the distance. Do you know the name of this sword? Jiang Qin stood where he was and did not chase after them. Instead, he stroked the sword in his hand and said softly, "This sword, chasing heaven." Swoosh! The moment he finished speaking, the sword in Jiang Qin's hand shot out. It was like a snow-white thunderbolt, flashing continuously in the air. In 3 breaths' time, the sword caught up with Sword Gate Guan's one-armed and pierced through his glabella, slashing him into the air. Then, the sword turned and slashed towards the other people. After a dozen breaths' time, none of the remaining people survived. They all died under the Chasing Heaven sword. Chasing Heaven. The weapon of Tianqin Divine King. Impossible. Legend has it that Chasing Heaven ascended to the 9 heavens divine world with Tianqin Divine King. How could it be in the godless continent? Exclamations were incessant. Especially after hearing the 2 words Chasing Heaven, greed flashed in the eyes of the group. Yeah, even I didn't know why Chasing Heaven would be in the desolate God Dao field. Jiang Qin said softly and frowned. He already had doubts in his heart. Back then, when Jiang Qin ascended, he brought Chasing Heaven to the 9 heavens divine world. Until his death, Chasing Heaven was still in his hands. Then, after Jiang Qin's death, why would Chasing Heaven come to the godless continent? And why would it appear in the desolate God Dao Field's sword tomb? Previously, if Jiang Qin did not have a connection with Chasing Heaven, Jiang Qin would not dare to believe that he would meet Chasing Heaven here. How can an ordinary person like you possess a weapon that Tianqin Divine King once used? Hand it over. At this moment, several geniuses who used swords walked towards Jiang Qin. Sword light flickered in their eyes, and there was even more greed. Even Li Fengyuan frowned. He lowered his head and glanced at his crimson dragon's sword, seemingly somewhat disdainful. This sword can only be used by me, Jiang Qin said softly. Chasing Heaven had already returned to his hand. The sword was personally forged by Jiang Qin. The sword's spirit was also nurtured by Jiang Qin with his blood essence. Although he did not know why, the power of Chasing Heaven was far inferior to before. However, the only person who could use Chasing Heaven in this world was him, Jiang Qin. What's the situation in this generation's barren state? Experts are emerging in large numbers, and they can actually compete with the geniuses of other large states. Could it be that history is about to repeat itself? In this generation, the barren state is going to rise and unify the godless continent again. Many people's hearts palpitated, and a trace of confusion flashed across their eyes. Since ancient times, only the barren state had unified the godless continent. Even the blue-eyed white dragon back then was born in the barren state. Moreover, some experts in history, the supreme experts who had once unified the godless continent, all came from the barren state without exception. This was hard to imagine and hard to understand. Why were the creatures who could unify the godless continent all from the barren state? Someone once said that it's impossible for the barren state to rise again. I heard that for some reason, the barren state's fate dragon vein was severed by someone. The barren state's fate has run out. Logically speaking, it's impossible for so many geniuses to appear, much less be so strong. Some people knew some secrets, and were secretly communicating. And at this moment, Jiang Qin stood in the air, looking at the 3 quasi-saint sword masters in front of him, and said mockingly, "With your realm, I should call you sword saints, right?" Chapter 3:17. It's good that you know. What right do you have to use Tianqin Celestial King's weapon? Hand it over and I'll spare your life. The 3 of them looked contemptuous as sword intent rose from their bodies. The 3 of them stood there like 3 peerless swords, giving off a feeling of sharpness. However, Jiang Qin was very calm. With Chasing Heaven in his hand, he waved his hand and drew a sword flower in front of him. He smiled and said, "If you want Chasing Heaven, you can take it with your strength. Why waste your breath? You're courting death. If that's the case, we'll kill you and take Chasing Heaven," the 3 of them said in a low voice. Immediately, Sword intent soared into the sky, and 3 terrifying sword beams surged towards Jiangchen like a river. When Jiangchen saw this, he kept chasing heaven and formed seals with both hands. 3 defensive arrays were formed in succession. The sword light smashed onto the formations, causing a series of explosions to erupt. Moreover, in just 3 breaths of time, 3 formations were slashed apart. However, these 3 breaths' time were enough for Jiangchen. Avatar! At this moment, 3 clones appeared beside Jiangchen one after the other. They dashed toward the 3 people. As for Jiangchen himself, he stood in the distance and cast his water and lightning elemental spells. A water dragon leaped out of the void, bringing with it a biting cold frost. Wherever it passed, everything was frozen and sealed in ice. Following that, a lightning bolt flashed and chased after the water dragon. In the next second, the water dragon crashed down and exploded in front of the 3 of them. Fog exploded in the sky. The lightning bolt rushed in and connected with the water. Instantly, the 3 of them were electrocuted and a burnt smell spread. Dark elemental, dark sky! Without waiting for the 3 of them to react, Jiangchen formed seals with both hands again. A black fog descended, and like a dark sky, it enveloped the 3 of them. Instantly, the 3 of them lost their senses and could not tell their direction. All they could see was endless darkness. Light elemental, purification! Before the 3 of them could rush out of the black fog, a mysterious light like the sun enveloped the 3 of them. In an instant, their expressions changed drastically as they felt the strength in their bodies weakening. In merely 3 breaths of time, the 3 people's cultivation fell from second sage to low-level heaven realm. And it was still falling. Earth element, earth collapse spike. Fire element, robin. Wood type, big tube. Jiangchen didn't give the 3 of them a chance to catch their breaths. He continued to cast spells. Spells rained down on the 3 of them like a torrential storm. A dozen breaths later, the metal elemental technique descended, and thousands of sharp swords pierced through the 3 of them, killing them on the spot. Holy sh*T! Didn't he use a sword? How can he know magic? 7 types of spells, all of them. Dual cultivation and swordsmanship. Are you stupid? He is clearly a triple cultivator of swordsmanship and martial arts. Are you blind? Didn't you see the array formation I set up earlier? It's the 4 cultivators of sword arts, martial arts, and array. The crowd exclaimed in astonishment. Even Li Fengyuan and the others were startled. It was already difficult for ordinary people to cultivate one profession. Only a few geniuses could cultivate 2 professions at the same time. As for triple cultivators, they were even rarer and almost impossible to find. There were only a handful of people who could cultivate 4 professions in this world. You are already so powerful at upper-level venerable realm. If you grow up, Li Fengyuan muttered to himself. The crimson dragon in his hand roared, and his aura surged. He had decided to attack. However, at this moment, all of his subordinates were killed by Jianglu and the others. At the same time, Jianglu and the others charged toward Li Fengyuan. I am not afraid of fighting all of you alone. Li Fengyuan was extremely powerful. He didn't retreat in the face of Wakako and the others who were charging toward him. He held the crimson dragon in his hand and charged upward. A sword ray that looked like a 5-clawed golden dragon shot out. Jianglu didn't retreat when he saw that. He formed a fist with both hands and punched out. Boom! However, the fist ray was shattered by an explosion. The sword ray didn't slow down and directly slashed Jianglu's body. Poof! Immediately, a deep wound appeared on Jianglu's chest. Even his heart had been shattered. Moreover, the wound spread down and went straight to Jianglu's dantian. He was going to cripple Jianglu. Bless the common people! The shepherd god's eyes narrowed. He pointed the staff in his hand at Jianglu. A ray of holy light fell and stabilized Jianglu's injury. At the same time, a lightning elemental spell, like a giant palm, fell toward Li Fengyuan. Wakako also attacked. He punched down. The power of the heavenly tyrant body was like a ferocious beast roaring out. Do you need my help? Jiang Chen smiled and said. I don't think I need to do anything to deal with him, right? Li Fengyuan was very powerful, but Jiang Lu and the others weren't weak either. Moreover, with the shepherd god here, Jiang Chen didn't think that Jiang Lu and the others would lose. However, just as he finished speaking, he saw a tall and sturdy young man appear beside Li Fengyuan. With the appearance of this person, the sky changed color. This person's aura was too powerful. Although he was only a quasi-saint, the aura he emitted was comparable to that of a true sage. The second prince of the Zhongzhou Empire, Li Fengzi. He's the strongest among the princes of the Zhongzhou Empire. It's said that he's even stronger than the prince. If he wasn't born after the prince, the second prince Li Fengzi would be the next emperor of the Zhongzhou Empire. Exclamations shook the sky. Some people even saluted Li Fengzi. As for Li Fengzi, he waved his hand and dispersed the lightning and Wakako's fist radiance. Then, he stood in front of Li Fengyuan and said, The door of the main palace is about to open. Fighting now is equivalent to consuming one's spiritual energy. It's not good for entering the main palace. Li Fengyuan opened his mouth, but he didn't dare to say anything to his elder brother. What? Are you afraid? Wakako's eyes were purple. With a wave of his hand, the power of the heavenly tyrant body turned into a purple halberd. He was overbearing and domineering, never afraid of a battle. Once the battle started, he would fight to the death. I'll agree to a battle of the same level. But the gap between your cultivation and mine is too big. I won't bully you. Li Fengzi said softly. Let's leave this matter for now. You think we'll let it go just because you said so? Who do you think you are? Jiang Lu shouted angrily. Li Fengyuan sent people to kill us. We haven't settled this debt yet. If I say we'll let it go, then we'll let it go. If you don't agree, I don't mind bullying the weak like you. Li Fengzi said softly, with the demeanor of an emperor. At the same time, his aura skyrocketed again, as if he was an emperor. At this moment, Wakako and Jiang Lu both felt the pressure, and their expressions turned ugly. Especially Jiang Lu, who asked Wakako honestly, Can you beat him? Wakako was also stunned, and said bluntly, No. What about me? Can I fight with you? At this moment, Jiang Chen came to Jiang Lu's side. He looked straight at Li Fengzi and said, Since you don't want to bully us with your cultivation, why don't you suppress your cultivation? I'll fight with you at the upper level of the Venerable Realm. Do you dare? Chapter 318. Li Fengzi had the demeanor of a king and disdained to bully the weak. He was arrogant, but he had the strength to be arrogant. Even Wakako and Jiang Lu thought that they were no match for Li Fengzi. Of course, it wasn't that Wakako and Jiang Lu were weak, but that Li Fengzi's cultivation was too high. His cultivation had reached the level of a quasi-sage, and there was even a seal in his body. His true strength was probably already that of a sage. They were all geniuses, but a slight difference in cultivation level was like a chasm that was difficult to cross. If Wakako and Jiang Lu were both quasi-sages, Jiang Chen believed that they had the ability to fight with Li Fengzi. And now, of course, Jiang Chen, as the boss, had to make a move. However, if he fought with Li Fengzi in this situation, Jiang Chen wouldn't be Li Fengzi's opponent without using the forbidden technique. Even if he used the forbidden technique, with Li Fengzi's strength, it would be difficult for Jiang Chen to defeat him. Jiang Chen was confident. He was proud and aloof, but he was never arrogant. He would fight those who deserved to be fought, and he wouldn't fight those who didn't deserve to be fought. At this moment, Li Fengzi stared at Jiang Chen, and his eyes narrowed. He felt a trace of extraordinariness from Jiang Chen. At the same time, Li Fengzi had also heard of Jiang Chen's name. Although it wasn't very famous, he also felt that Jiang Chen must be very strong. Otherwise, why would Wakako the tyrant, Jiang Lu the martial ghost's descendant, and Bai Fengyu the White Emperor's daughter follow Jiang Chen? It's good to fight at the same level, Li Fengzi said softly. Don't go too far. Oh? Don't you want to fight to the death? Jiang Chen asked. The main palace's door is about to open, and I don't want to waste my strength here, Li Fengzi said directly. Moreover, I don't have any deep grudges with you. When these words came out, Jianglu and Wakako's eyes immediately turned red. The third prince Li Fengyuan had sent people to ambush them. If it weren't for their strength, they would have died long ago. This was an enmity of killing. However, in Li Fengza's words, this great enmity had become a great enmity without any deep enmity. How could Wakako and Jianglu let this go? All right, let's stop here, Jiangchen said with a smile. Boss? Are we really going to stop here? Wakako and Jiangchen frowned, not knowing what Jiangchen was thinking. The grudge between them and the third prince and the second prince was a matter of life and death. Now, since they were going to start a war, why did they stop here? What was the difference between this and sparring? Since they couldn't fight to the death, this battle became meaningless in the eyes of Wakako and Jianglu. There are too many people here who want to kill us. Jiangchen transmitted his voice. If Li Fengza and I are both seriously injured, do you know how dangerous our situation will be? When Wakako and Jianglu heard this, their expressions froze. They looked around and realized that many people were looking at them with undisguised killing intent. We'll listen to you, boss, Jianglu said. At this moment, Li Fengza suppressed his cultivation to the upper level of the venerable realm. In the next moment, the surrounding people dispersed and gave the two of them space to fight. I rarely fight with people of the same cultivation level, Li Fengza said softly. I see that you're not bad, so I'll suppress my cultivation level to fight with you. Are you satisfied? Of course I'm satisfied. The second prince is generous, Jiangchen said with a smile. Boom! The moment he finished speaking, Li Fengza and Jiangchen's eyes suddenly focused. Then, an extremely terrifying aura erupted from the two of them. The aura was like a rainbow, piercing through the clouds. Even the air around them was distorted. So strong. The aura of the upper level of the venerable realm is comparable to that of the upper level of the heavenly realm. This is a real monster. This generation of people from the barren state is really strong. There were exclamations all around. At the same time, Jiangchen and Li Fengza had already started fighting. Both of them rushed out like ferocious dragons. One man and one fist collided in midair like dragons emerging from the sea. One person's imperial dragon aura was like a rainbow, while the other person's entire body seemed to be made of gold. When the two fists collided, there was a loud explosion. Then, everyone saw that Jiangchen and Li Fengza were both sent flying. Jiangchen was sent flying 3 steps back, while Li Fengza was only sent flying 1 step. The difference in strength was obvious at a glance. Show me what you're best at. Li Fengza had the upper hand, but his expression was not very good. This was because he could feel that Jiangchen had not used his full strength in the previous punch. Was he looking down on him? As the second prince, Li Fengza naturally could not accept this. I'm best at martial arts. Jiangchen raised his eyebrows. What about you? Same as you. Li Fengza's eyes narrowed. He clenched his fists, and 2 dragon heads appeared on his fists. With a dragon's roar, Li Fengza rushed out again. His imperial aura was like an emperor descending. There was no trace of fear in his eyes. He moved forward bravely as if the world had to make way for him. Jiangchen's expression turned serious. He also clenched his fists. His left hand gathered the light of the sun, and his right hand appeared the brilliance of the moon. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, both of their fists collided again. This time, the moon fist was shattered, and the sun fist dissipated. Jiangchen was sent flying hundreds of meters away. However, at the same time, Li Fengza was also sent flying. Moreover, this time, Li Fengza was sent flying for nearly 1,000 meters. What? The second prince, Li Fengza, is actually no match for Jiangchen. Don't say it so early. Li Fengza's strength is not below Jiangchen's. Both of them still have many martial arts techniques that they have not used. Everyone exclaimed with their eyes wide open. They could not believe that Li Fengza was actually at a disadvantage. At the same time, Jianglu, Wakako, and the rest also had looks of disbelief on their faces. This was because in their eyes, Jiangchen was invincible. They had seen Jiangchen fight with others. Basically, it was a crushing defeat. He had never been beaten to such a state. You are very strong. If you are willing to follow me, the door of the Zhongzhou dynasty will be open for you forever. Li Fengzi shouted. His words were full of sincerity. Just as he said before, he valued Jiangchen and cherished talent. The dynasty is too big, and the rules are too strict. I am just an independent cultivator. I better not go. Jiangchen said softly. Wind blew under his feet. His figure moved horizontally, and his fist pressed down. Kid! My second brother values you so much. Don't fail to appreciate his kindness. Li Fengyuan rebuked angrily. How many people want to follow my second brother? That's others. Jiangchen's hand movements did not stop at all. His fist was like a millstone, pressing down on Li Fengzi's head. Li Fengzi raised his head. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Then, he punched out with one hand. His entire arm seemed to have turned into a real dragon. Terrifying imperial qi exploded. Under the punch, the void was distorted as if it was about to be torn apart. Abyss separation. Jiangchen did not dare to be careless. Under the punch, his other hand performed a martial technique, the abyss separation technique. In an instant, a yin-yang tai chi diagram appeared beside Jiangchen. Under the countercurrent technique, it dissolved Li Fengzi's fist radiance. At the same time, his fist bombarded 3 inches away from Li Fengzi's head. Once again, it could not go any further. This was because, above Li Fengzi's head, a pure gold shield appeared. Dragon-scale armor. Jiangchen exclaimed softly. This was a Dao Soul. It was ranked 18th and could be upgraded. Moreover, this dragon-scale armor Dao Soul was extraordinary. It was a twin Dao Soul. Those who had the dragon-scale armor Dao Soul must have the dragon-scale reverse sword Dao Soul. Slash. At this moment, Li Fengzi waved his hand. Just as Jiangchen expected, the dragon-scale reverse sword Dao Soul appeared in his hand. Along with a shout, a sword radiance exploded. Along with it, a shocking dragon roar could be heard. Chasing the heavens! Jiangchen exclaimed. Chasing the heavens appeared in his hand. Then, he punched out a fist radiance, and shattered Li Fengzi's sword radiance. Following that, chasing the heavens slashed down and a sword radiance as white as the moon fell. Clang! Li Fengzi moved sideways. At the same time, the dragon-scale armor stood in front of him, blocking the chasing the heavens slash. Then, Li Fengzi formed a fist seal with his left hand. A vast dragon's aura exploded. The dragon's aura gathered and turned into a 5-clawed golden dragon. Then, along with the sword radiance of the dragon's scale reverse sword, it charged towards Jiangchen. Chapter 319. In an instant, a yin-yang tai chi diagram appeared beside Jiangchen. Under the reverse flow technique, Li Fengzi's fist radiance was completely neutralized. At the same time, his fist was 3 inches away from Li Fengzi's head, but it could not penetrate any further. This was because a pure gold shield appeared above Li Fengzi's head. Dragon-scale armor! Jiangchen exclaimed softly. This was a Dao Soul, ranked 18th, and could be upgraded. Moreover, the dragon-scale armor Dao Soul was extraordinary. It was a twin Dao Soul. Those who had the dragon-scale armor Dao Soul would definitely have the dragon-scale reverse sword Dao Soul. Slash! At this moment, Li Fengzi waved his hand. As Jiangchen expected, the dragon-scale reverse sword Dao Soul appeared in his hand. With a loud shout, a sword radiance erupted, accompanied by the roar of a dragon. Chasing the sky! Jiangchen exclaimed softly as Chasing the Sky appeared in his hand. Then, a fist radiance blasted out and shattered Li Fengzi's sword radiance. Following that, Chasing the Sky slashed down and a sword radiance as white as the moon descended. Clang! Li Fengzi moved sideways. At the same time, the dragon-scale armor appeared in front of him and blocked the Chasing the Sky sword. Then, Li Fengzi formed a fist seal with his left hand and a vast dragon's aura erupted. The dragon's aura gathered and turned into a 5-clawed golden dragon. Then, with the sword radiance of the dragon's scale reverse sword in his hand, it charged towards Jiangchen. The dragon's sword was supported by the imperial dragon's aura. It was like a golden thunderbolt accompanied by the roar of a dragon. Its power was boundless. At this moment, Jiangchen and the others looked nervous. They broke out in cold sweat for Jiangchen. They had never seen anyone as strong as Li Fengzi, and they had never seen such a grave look on Jiangchen's face. "I admit that you are strong," Jiangchen said seriously. Beside him, Li Yuan turned into a Tai Chi. He struck across the air and dispersed the imperial dragon's aura on the dragon's sword. Then, Jiangchen slashed with his sword. Like the falling moon, the sword radiance of the dragon's sword was cut into nothingness. "Kill! Kill!" In the next moment, Jiangchen and Li Fengzi roared at the same time. One of them held the dragon scale armor in his left hand and the dragon scale reverse sword in his right hand. Jiangchen held the chasing heaven's sword in his right hand and gathered the light of the sun and moon in his left hand. He pushed out his palm and the sword light was sharp. Boom! Boom! Then, with a series of explosions, people could only see the light and sword radiance wantonly, but they couldn't see the figures of Jiangchen and Li Fengzi. Their attacks were too excessive, and their movements were as fast as lightning. The two of them continued to exchange blows in the air. After a dozen breaths of time, a dragon's roar erupted, scattering all the light. At this point, everyone saw that Jiangchen was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. He was standing in the air, using chasing the sky as a crutch to support himself. His injuries were extremely serious. On the other side, Li Fengzi stood proudly. His aura surged, and there was not a trace of blood on his body. Jiangchen has lost. The genius from the barren state is finally defeated. Everyone was amazed by Li Fengzi's strength, and heaved a sigh of relief. To be honest, many people had guessed that Jiangchen had fought against many heaven realm geniuses with his venerable realm cultivation and was invincible all the way. At this rate, Jiangchen was very likely to be invincible for the rest of his life. And now, Jiangchen's invincible legend had finally been broken. "Boss? Impossible! Boss! Master!" At this moment, Jiang Lu and the rest widened their eyes in disbelief. In their hearts, Jiangchen was invincible. How could he be defeated? Only Jiangchen himself was smiling. He put away the chasing heaven sword and cupped his hands at Li Fengzi. He smiled meaningfully and said, "The second prince is really powerful. I can afford to lose." However, no one expected Li Fengzi's answer to admit that he had lost. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. "Second brother?" Li Fengyuan was surprised. Looking at the uninjured Li Fengzi, he did not believe that he had lost. However, only Li Fengzi himself knew that he had indeed been defeated in their last exchange. However, for the sake of his dignity, he used his quasi-saint cultivation at the last moment, and it was only in this way that he managed to injure Jiangchen. If they had fought at the same cultivation level, Li Fengzi would have already lost. Li Fengzi even thought about it, and understood that if he had not used his quasi-sage strength, he would have lost this battle without a doubt. Even if he used his heaven realm strength, it would be very difficult for him to defeat Jiangchen. "The next time we meet, I hope to have a good battle with you," Li Fengzi said proudly. "I have lost this battle, but the next battle might not. You have unlimited potential." Jiangchen smiled and said, "Finally, I have met a worthy opponent. Listen to my orders. The people of the Zhongzhou dynasty are not allowed to attack Jiangchen and his group." At this moment, Li Fengzi shouted loudly. His face was upright, and there was a royal aura in his expression. He was a natural king. If he had not been born after the first prince, the next emperor of the Zhongzhou dynasty would definitely be him. And his words were like an imperial edict. At this moment, the people of the Zhongzhou dynasty knelt and nodded in agreement. "Second brother, this matter is over?" Li Fengyuan said in a deep voice. He was very unhappy. He thought that Li Fengzi clearly had the strength to suppress Jiang Chen and his group, but he insisted on fighting at the same cultivation level because of his so-called pride. Now, he had lost. Moreover, after losing, he had actually given such an order. This made Li Fengyuan unable to understand. This matter is not over, Li Fengzi said coldly. He glanced coldly at Li Fengyuan from the corner of his eyes and said, "If you do something wrong, you have to take responsibility and bear the consequences. Today, if I were not here, you would have been a corpse." Li Fengyuan's expression suddenly changed when he heard this. He knew that Li Fengzi was going to punish him. However, he did not believe that his second brother could do anything to him. Moreover, Li Fengyuan believed that even if Li Fengzi was not here today, Jiang Chen and his group would not be able to do anything to him. This was because the third prince's strength was not weak. "You have no enmity with Jiang Chen and his group, but you sent people to kill the tyrant Wakako and Jianglu. This matter you were wrong," Li Fengzi said. "Apologize." "Second brother!" "Why?" Li Fengyuan stared. He could not believe that his second brother would punish him in front of so many people. He even wanted him to apologize to Jianglu, Wakako and the others. He was the third prince of the Zhongzhou dynasty. In the entire Zhongzhou, how many people could accept his apology? "If you don't want to, then I will," Li Fengzi said softly. He tidied up his robe and his expression became serious. He faced Wakako and Jianglu and said solemnly, "My younger brother, Li Fengyuan, has offended you before. I apologize on your behalf." What's the situation?" Wakako and Jianglu were dumbfounded. They did not expect Li Fengzi to do this. Even Jiang Chen was surprised. "He is a character. Not only is he a king, but he is also an ambitious person," Jiang Chen praised in his heart. He smiled and said, "They are not dead. What is there to apologize for? Let's forget about this matter." "That's good," Li Fengzi said softly. Then, he looked deeply at Jiang Chen and said, "The main hall is about to open. You guys better not go in. The battle inside is the most intense and cruel in the desolate god arena." Chapter 320. Those who entered the Desolation God's dojo, no matter how fierce the fights were in other places, their ultimate goal was to enter the main hall. Once, someone had obtained something in the main hall. He didn't know what it was, but after he came out of the Desolation God's dojo, he rose to power and suppressed his peers, eventually dominating the world. Someone had even seen the inheritance of the Desolation God in the main hall but failed to obtain it. Someone had also obtained a weapon in the main hall of the Desolation God, which was far more powerful than a divine artifact. Someone had speculated that the inheritance in the main hall of the Desolation God might not be passed down. However, the things hidden in it could be obtained by anyone. As long as you were strong enough and had enough opportunities, you could obtain everything. Therefore, after entering the main hall of the Desolation God, everyone would erupt. No matter where the enemy came from or what identity they had, once they competed, they would kill without hesitation. "Thank you for your reminder," Jiang Chen said softly. "But I want to go in and see the world, that's all." "Be careful," Li Fengzi said. Buzz. As soon as he finished speaking, the light curtain in front of the main hall suddenly disappeared. Then, the door of the main hall opened automatically. In an instant, everyone's expressions changed, and there were even some that charged out like bolts of lightning towards the entrance of the main hall. Li Fengzi and the others didn't fall behind. A group of Central Plains geniuses, led by Li Fengzi, rushed into the main hall in an instant. The geniuses of Underworld, North Continent, South Continent, and other major continents joined forces and attacked in groups of 3 to 5. Jiang Chen didn't move. He stood outside the main hall and looked at Wakako and the others, saying, "Don't go in." "Why?" Wakako frowned. "Is it really dangerous inside?" Before Jiang Chen could say anything, a miserable scream was heard. Then, everyone saw Li Fengyuan flying out of the main hall. His body was covered in blood, and there were cracks on his body. He was almost beaten to death. Have you seen it? Jiangchen said mockingly. Do you still want to go in? No. Wakako shook his head and decided not to go into the main hall. After all, Li Fengyuan was extremely strong and was at the level of a secondary saint. But in the end, he had only gone in for a few breaths of time before he was sent flying out and almost died. Even a secondary sage would find it hard to gain a foothold in the main hall. Wakako, Jianglu, and the others were only at the heaven realm. If they went in, it would be the same as sending themselves to their deaths. Master, are you going in? Baifengyu said worriedly. Why don't we just forget about it? We've already obtained so many Dao seeds in the Desolation God Dao field. It's already a great harvest. There's no need to take the risk. I'm just going in to take a look. Jiangchen said softly. If there's nothing else, you can leave the Desolate God's dojo and wait for me outside. After saying that, Jiangchen's figure dimmed. He used the methods of a dark master and stealthily entered the main palace. The main hall was huge, as big as 3 football fields. Weapons were placed on both sides of the main hall. They were covered with restrictions and formations, and they were even protected by barriers. In the middle of the main hall, there was a fountain that sprayed out spring water that flickered with divine light. It was obviously an extraordinary item. And right above the main hall, there was a dragon throne. On the dragon throne, there was a simple box. And right above the dragon throne, there was a painting. But in this painting, there was only a stalk of grass. In addition, there were some bottles and jars in the main hall. They should be filled with elixirs. And at this moment, those who had entered the main hall were snatching these things. Only the strongest few were standing below the dragon throne, staring at the simple box on the dragon throne. Is that the Desolate God's inheritance? Someone asked, unsure. It should be. The Nine-Li Prince frowned. He stretched out his hand and gently pushed forward, but he was pushed back by an invisible force. Li Fengzi was also among them. He frowned, an imperial draconic chi flickered in his eyes. He held the dragon scale armor and dragon scale reverse sword in his hands. Beside them, there were dozens of sky prides who did not move. Not only were they wary of each other, but they were also thinking about how to obtain the box on the dragon throne. Jiangchen was also beside them. However, he had concealed his aura and figure, so these people did not notice him at all. Moreover, Jiangchen's gaze did not land on the simple box, but on the painting. The painting was very simple. There was only a stalk of grass. However, because it was too simple, it attracted Jiangchen's attention. Every item in the main hall of the Desolate God was a rare treasure. How could such a simple painting be placed there for no reason? This painting. Let's take it as a souvenir. A young man in white held a folding fan in his hand. With a wave of his hand, he wanted to keep the painting in his hand. However, just as he waved his hand, the stalk of grass in the painting swayed gently. Then, an extremely sharp sword radiance shot out from the painting and sliced the young man in white into powder. Not even a trace of ash was left. Sword intent. Supreme sword intent. At that moment, everyone retreated one after another. They did not dare to get too close to the painting. That was because even a sage could not block the supreme sword intent. Idiot! Can the things here be touched casually? Someone said angrily. If that supreme sword intent was not only targeted at the person who attacked, just a trace of the supreme sword intent's aftershock would be enough to kill everyone in the main hall. Does the enchantment in front of the dragon throne need to be broken by the supreme sword intent? Li Fengzi said in a low voice. They had tried before, but they could not break the enchantment in front of the dragon throne. And now, these people finally realized something. If he wanted to open the enchantment in front of the dragon throne, the key was in that picture scroll. However, how could they control the supreme sword intent? With their strength, it was difficult to even touch it, let alone control it. If I can't control it, then I'll comprehend it. If I can comprehend a trace of the supreme sword intent, I might be able to use it to open the enchantment in front of the dragon throne, Jiangchen thought. Hiding in the dark, a trace of divine consciousness slowly approached the painting. And Jiang Chun was not the only one who did this. After all, the people present were not fools. Since they knew that they could not control the supreme sword intent, they would comprehend it. Moreover, if they could comprehend the supreme sword intent, even if they could not get the ancient box, it would be enough. Puff! However, after a few breaths, someone's face suddenly turned pale. That was because when his divine consciousness approached the painting, it was injured by a trace of the supreme sword intent's aura. His entire soul almost collapsed. There was even one person who, because he was not careful enough, his soul directly turned into nothingness, and he died on the spot. Since ancient times, the enchantment here has never been opened. Li Fengzi was very careful. He was also guessing in his heart whether this supreme sword intent could really be comprehended. If he could not comprehend it, what should he do? Since the inheritance was left behind, there must be a way to obtain it. And this way must be in this main hall. A sky cried from the underworld continent said, "Perhaps the way to obtain the inheritance is not in this painting. It's all just speculation." A sky cried from the eastern continent smiled bitterly. "It's just that the supreme sword intent on this painting is too terrifying. If one's divine consciousness gets even a little closer, it might affect one's soul, causing it to collapse and death. How can we comprehend it?" Someone's expression was ugly. He felt that there was no way out in front of him. Chapter 321. Everyone was guessing that one needed to comprehend the supreme sword intent to be able to break through the restrictions and array formations on the dragon throne. However, how could this supreme sword intent be something that mortals could comprehend? This level of sword intent was incomparably berserk. The slightest bit of carelessness would damage one's divine soul, or even extinguish one's divine soul entirely, dying one's body and Tao vanishing. And now, a group of the top geniuses from various major states stood in front of the dragon throne with helpless faces, feeling rather helpless towards this supreme sword intent. If the desolate god's inheritance was so easily obtained by others, then this kind of inheritance would have long been common on the streets. Li Fengzi said softly, then sighed. Perhaps the time for the desolate god's inheritance to appear has not yet arrived. Whoever can comprehend the supreme sword intent will be able to obtain the desolate god's inheritance. It didn't take long for almost everyone to know about this. Many people came over, wanting to attempt to comprehend the supreme sword intent. It was just that it was a pity that another dozen or so people were killed by the supreme sword intent, their divine souls extinguished. Myriad transformations! At this moment, Jiang Chun was hiding at the side, a green lamp floating up and down in his eyes, burning with a faint flame. The myriad transformations heavenly lamp floated up and down, an obscure great Tao aura appeared on Jiang Chen's body. The myriad transformations heavenly lamp turned everything impossible into possible. Jiang Chen knew that relying on his own strength alone, he definitely could not comprehend the supreme sword intent. Therefore, he could only use the myriad transformations heavenly lamp. And in the process of using the myriad transformations heavenly lamp, Jiang Chen's body and spirit were focused, unable to move, his body fused with the myriad transformations heavenly lamp. At this time, if he was discovered by others, Jiang Chen would not even have the strength to resist. Fortunately, Jiang Chen's concealment methods were very profound. Standing in front of the dragon throne, he continuously used the myriad transformations heavenly lamp to comprehend the supreme sword intent, and was not discovered by others. At the same time, there was also a youth hiding beside Jiang Chen. Jiang Chen did not discover this person, and this person also did not discover Jiang Chen. Just like this, the two people were practically hidden next to each other, standing together, but neither knew of the other's existence. Half a day later, quite a few people withdrew from the main palace. They more or less obtained some benefits, but there were also some who died here. Li Fengzi and the other most powerful geniuses didn't leave. They didn't want to give up and were currently using some methods in hopes of comprehending the unparalleled sword intent. 1. Suddenly, a rumbling sound came out from the main palace. Then, the entire palace began to shake. Sword glows emerged from the scroll and turned into ancient words floating in the air. At the same time, the restrictions and arrays on the dragon throne began to fluctuate. They were like porcelain vases that were cracking. Who? Someone comprehended the supreme sword intent. At this moment, Li Fengzi and the others were moved. They cried out in surprise as they scanned the entire palace. However, they did not see anything unusual, nor did they discover who had comprehended the supreme sword intent. At the same time, Jiang Chen's heart was in turmoil. It was all because this supreme sword intent wasn't comprehended by him. This meant that there was another person in this palace who was also comprehending the supreme sword intent, and his speed was even faster than his. You can comprehend the supreme sword intent as you wish, but don't even think about touching the box on the dragon throne, the Ninely Prince said coldly. After comprehending the supreme sword intent, open the restrictions and arrays. Everything else has nothing to do with you. No matter where you are or where you're hiding, if you dare to show yourself and fight with us for the inheritance of the desolate god, you'll definitely die, Li Fengzi said coldly. The supreme sword intent could only be comprehended by those who were capable. It couldn't be forced. However, no one would give up on the ancient box on the dragon throne. Moreover, everyone could see and guess that once someone completely comprehended the supreme sword intent, the restrictions and arrays on the dragon throne would automatically be unlocked. At that time, this box would be the target of everyone's competition. Only those with profound attainments in the sword Tao would have a chance to comprehend the supreme sword intent. Jiang Chen hid in the dark, frowning and puzzled. He had only comprehended 50% to 60% of the supreme sword intent with the 10,000 transformations heavenly lamp. To be able to make the painting appear, it meant that someone had comprehended 80% to 90% of the supreme sword intent. It was hard for Jiang Chen to imagine who had achieved such a high level of attainment in sword doctrine. I don't need the inheritance of the desolate god, but I must obtain this supreme sword intent, Jiang Chen thought to himself, his eyes flickering like a true dragon's slowly awakening. He secretly formed hand seals, set up arrays, and even restrictions. After a dozen breaths, a fog suddenly appeared and enveloped the painting. At this moment, everyone's eyes widened. Light gathered in their eyes, but they couldn't see the grass on the painting. At the same time, a puzzled voice sounded beside Jiang Chen. There! How dare you! How dare you hide beside us? In an instant, Li Fengzi and the others attacked, suppressing towards the place where Jiang Chen was. Jiang Chen's face was pitch black, and he was even more shocked. Even he didn't know that there was a powerhouse hiding beside him. Everyone, if you attack me, then no one will be able to comprehend this supreme sword intent. At that time, if you can't comprehend the supreme sword intent, who will unlock the restrictions and arrays on this dragon throne for you? At this moment, a youth in a red robe appeared beside Jiang Chen. He was quite handsome, with a pair of sword-like eyebrows, and he held a peachwood sword in his hand. You're the one who comprehended the supreme sword intent? Jiuli Prince raised his eyebrows. How's your comprehension? I'm indeed comprehending the supreme sword intent, but I can't completely comprehend it. The red-robed youth said softly. Someone is secretly interfering and blocking my vision. I can't see that painting clearly, so I can't continue comprehending it. We haven't interfered, Li Fengzi said coldly. A dragon shadow appeared in his eyes, and his gaze swept across every corner of the main hall. He frowned and said, Is there someone else hiding here? Who could it be? As far as I know, there aren't many particularly powerful dark masters among the geniuses who entered the desolate god's dojo this time. Jiuli Prince said in a deep voice. How can an ordinary dark master hide under our noses? Could it be Mu Xingyun? Someone guessed. He had a deep impression of Mu Xingyun. After all, he was a dark master with a shadow Dao spirit, and he was very powerful. It can't be Mu Xingyun. He doesn't have the guts. Another person shook his head. He knew that Mu Xingyun was very careful and wouldn't take such a risk. Could it be him? At this moment, Li Fengzi's expression turned serious. He looked at the door of the main hall and said softly, Jiang Chen, is it you? Mounty technique. Suddenly, a youth formed a seal with his hands, and a mysterious light burst out. The mysterious light gathered in the main hall and turned into a mirror. In an instant, everyone saw Jiang Chen looking at them with a dark face in the mirror. It's really you, Jiang Chen. Your concealment technique is so profound. You're a dark master. At this moment, everyone exclaimed and was even more moved. Moreover, someone directly attacked and wanted to suppress Jiang Chen. Chapter 322. Jiang Chen was in a bad mood. He did not expect that someone among these geniuses would know such a secret technique. Under the Mounty technique, Jiang Chen had nowhere to hide. I'm just here to take a look. Jiang Chen stopped hiding and said with a smile, Do as you please. Remove the array and restriction on the scroll. The red-robed youth said coldly, If I can't comprehend the supreme sword intent, the array and restriction on the dragon throne will be unbreakable. What does that have to do with me? Jiang Chen shrugged indifferently and said, I'm not interested in the rage god's inheritance, but I'm interested in the supreme sword intent. Hey, do you think anyone can comprehend the supreme sword intent? The red-robed youth said disdainfully, Only people from the supreme sword sect can comprehend it. Supreme sword sect? The supreme sword sect on the North State's heavenly mountain? Many people exclaimed, and even Li Fengzi's expression changed. That was because the supreme sword sect was too powerful and had a deep foundation. It was said that there was an expert who was about to become a god in the supreme sword sect. Their foundation was enough to compete with the Middle State dynasty. Moreover, when talking about the supreme sword sect, one had to talk about the sword Tao of the sect. Legend had it that the previous sect masters of the supreme sword sect could comprehend the supreme sword intent. In the past, there were even people who had personally witnessed a sect master of a supreme sword sect splitting open the heavens with a single sword strike, breaking through the void and ascending to godhood. Only people from the supreme sword sect can comprehend the supreme sword intent. Are you sure? Jiang Chen said mockingly. Then what am I comprehending? Buzz. The moment he said that, everyone felt a shocking sword intent erupt from Jiang Chen's body. In this sword intent, everyone's expression changed. They felt like a lonely boat that could be drowned by this sword intent at any time and be destroyed. Moreover, this sword intent seemed to have no end. It was supreme and had no heaven and earth. Supreme sword intent? Impossible! Who are you? At this moment, everyone was visibly moved, and even the red-robed young man's expression had changed. It was all because in this world, besides the people of the Supreme Sword sect, there was absolutely no second person that could comprehend the Supreme Sword intent. Moreover, not every disciple of the Supreme Sword sect could comprehend the Supreme Sword intent. I was the one who concealed the painting. So what? I can also comprehend the Supreme Sword intent, so what? What do you want? Jiang Chen was very calm. He smiled and said, None of you can break my seals and formations, therefore, only I can see this scroll now. If you want to kill me, then no one will be able to comprehend the Supreme Sword intent in this painting. As such, the restrictions and formations on the dragon throne will not be able to be undone. It's up to you to decide, Jiang Chen said mockingly. I'll kill you. The red-robed young man was immediately enraged. He slashed out with the peachwood sword in his hand, and a shocking sword light rushed towards Jiang Chen's face like a mystic light. Jiang Chen chuckled when he saw this. He didn't resist. It was because he knew that the red-robed young man's sword was not something he could withstand, unless he used a forbidden technique. However, Jiang Chen did not dodge or resist. He stood in place with a calm expression. It was because he was confident. Stop. Brat from the Supreme Sword sect, don't act recklessly. In an instant, before the sword light hit Jiang Chen, a few angry shouts sounded. Then, Li Fengzi, Jiuli Prince, and the others all stood in front of Jiang Chen. The few of them struck out with their palms and fists, shattering the red-robed young man's sword light and even protecting Jiangchen behind them. It seems that you have made your choice, Jiangchen said with a smile. Then I'll leave this person to you. I'll continue to comprehend the Supreme Sword intent. The Supreme Sword intent belongs to you, and the box on the dragon throne belongs to us? Li Fengzi said in a deep voice. Can you agree? I swear on my divine soul, I don't want that box. Jiangchen was very decisive and swore on the spot. At this moment, Li Fengzi and the others completely believed in Jiangchen. As for the red-robed young man, his expression was very ugly at this moment, and the killing intent in his eyes soared. He had already comprehended the Supreme Sword intent by 80 to 90%. Just as he was about to comprehend it completely, he did not expect Jiangchen to appear halfway. What made him most resentful was that Li Fengzi and the others were actually standing on Jiangchen's side. And what made him most helpless was that he was powerless to undo the array and restrictions that Jiangchen had set up on the painting. As a result, he could only watch as Jiangchen comprehended the Supreme Sword intent. Do you really want to do this? The red-robed young man said coldly. I can give up this Supreme Sword intent, but when the time comes, I will be among the people fighting for this box. Only those who are capable will get it. If you have the ability, come and get it. Li Fengzi and the others raised their eyebrows. They all knew that once the restrictions and arrays on the dragon throne were undone, everyone here would become opponents. Since that was the case, what was the difference between having one more opponent and one less opponent? Now, in their hearts, as long as Jiangchen could comprehend the Supreme Sword intent and undo the restrictions and arrays on the dragon throne, it would be enough. What did other things have to do with them? It's better to come early than to come at the right time. At this moment, at the main gate of the main hall, a young man wearing brocade clothes and a white jade crown walked in with a smile on his face. Beside him, there was another young man wearing tattered clothes and a bamboo hat, like a fisherman. River Muddler! River Muddler, Xian Yuan Chang Kong! Xian Yuan Chang Feng! Everyone's expression froze. When they looked at the two young men, a hint of fear flashed in their eyes. This was because the River Muddler was too famous. They were the prodigies of the underworld continent, and the two of them had never split up. Whether it was a one-on-one fight or a battle royale, the two of them had always fought against their opponents with their strength. These two young men were from the Xianyuan family. Back then, when the two of them debuted, they had fought with more than 10 prodigies of the underworld continent on a big river. In that battle, the river had broken and the riverbed had collapsed. More than 10 prodigies of the underworld continent had died. The name River Muddler came from that battle. There are so many prodigies and powerhouses. How can I, Huang Jiucheng, be left out? After a few breaths, Huang Jiucheng appeared in front of everyone at the main gate of the main hall. His injuries had healed, and his cultivation level had skyrocketed. He must have obtained some good fortune elsewhere. It seems like no one is joining forces. In that case, I can also take a share of the loot. After a few breaths, Mu Xingyun also appeared. He looked calm, and an illusory figure floated behind him. That was his path soul. The barren continent has never declined. After 3 breaths, a young man stepped into the main hall and said softly. After that, he stood at the side and did not say anything else. However, the appearance of this person caused the expressions of everyone present to become tense. Even Li Fengzi had a grave expression on his face. This was because this person was the 3rd disciple of the Heaven and Earth Pavilion, Zhuge Taojin. He was a quasi-sage. A few years ago, his name had spread among the prodigies of the other continents. His reputation was as great as anyone present. Chapter 323. All of a sudden, there were so many geniuses in the main hall. Moreover, all of them were famous and powerful. At that moment, they seemed fearless. They walked to the dragon throne and stood in a row. Jiangchen stood behind Li Fengzi and the others. He looked calm as he secretly used the ever-changing heavenly lamp to comprehend the Supreme Sword intent. The red-robed young man stood on the other side. His eyes flashed with killing intent and his face was full of resentment. However, no one said anything. They all stood there quietly. No one asked or said anything. There was not even the slightest sound. That was because everyone who came here was smart. They knew what to ask and what not to ask. He also knew that at this time, since everyone was waiting, then it was fine to continue waiting. There was no need to ask too much. Time continued to pass. Many people came to the main hall one after another. One day later, Jiangchen suddenly opened his eyes. At the same time, the scroll collapsed and turned into powder. The moment the scroll disappeared, the array and restriction on the dragon throne disappeared. At the same time, the entire palace shook. The palace that had stood for countless years, and even the entire desolate god's training ground, was cracking and collapsing. At the same time, other than Jiangchen, everyone in the main hall rushed toward the dragon throne. They only had one goal, and that was the ancient box on the dragon throne that seemed to contain the desolate god's inheritance. As for Jiangchen, after comprehending the supreme sword intent, he retreated and prepared to leave. As he said before, he was not interested in the desolate god's inheritance. Now that he had obtained the supreme sword intent, it was time for him to leave. However, when Jiangchen came to the exit, he saw Li Fengzi and the others rushing toward him. Huang Jiucheng, Han Jiang, Shuge Taojin, and the red-robed young man were among them. "What's going on? Where's the box?" Jiangchen asked. "Tell me. What's the name of the supreme sword intent?" Li Fengzi said coldly. At that moment, his eyes were red as if he had lost his mind. It was as if he had gone crazy. The others were the same. They all stared at Jiangchen like wolves. In Zhuge Taojin's hand, the ancient box had already been opened. It was empty. "There's no inheritance in here," Huang Jiucheng said coldly. "But there's a piece of paper." "Oh," Jiangchen said softly, blinking his eyes. How could he not understand the situation in front of him? The note in the box most likely stated that the supreme sword will was the inheritance of the Aragami. And when Jiangchen comprehended the supreme sword intent thoroughly, he also sensed something. It was all because this supreme sword intent was named Desolation. The desolate deity and the desolate deity both had a desolate child, which was hidden in the painting. Furthermore, they were also in the main palace. In addition to what Huang Jiucheng and the others had said, Jiangchen finally understood everything. In the next moment, Jiangchen smiled and stepped out of the Desolation God's training ground. "Stay here! Chase!" In the face of the Desolation God's inheritance, the group of people could no longer remain calm. This was one of the top inheritances in the godless continent. Once they obtained it, they could create a great sect, a supreme sect, or even dominate the entire godless continent. In the face of the Desolation God's inheritance, even the sages, sage kings, supreme sages, and godly state elites would be jealous. "Huh! What's going on?" After a few breaths, the group of elites standing outside the abyss at the Desolation God's training ground saw Jiangchen dashing into the distance like a shooting star. Behind him, Li Fengzi and the others were red in the face and eyes as they chased after him with all their might. "The Desolation God's inheritance has appeared. It's with Jiangchen." It was unknown who shouted, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder, shaking the hearts of everyone present fiercely for a moment. In the next moment, a sage attacked. His palm turned into clouds and shot up into the sky. Then, it covered the sky and descended. The palm stretched for tens of thousands of miles and covered the entire area. Under the palm, Jiangchen felt the power of the sage. A hint of fear flashed in his eyes. At this moment, Jiangchen even planned to use a forbidden technique. "Let's see who dares!" Suddenly, a roar was heard. The green sky Confucian scholar's hair danced wildly. Like a mad demon, he shattered the palm print with a punch. Then, he took a step forward. It was as if he had shrunk the ground into an inch. It was more like he had teleported. In an instant, he was in front of Jiangchen. He said to Jiangchen, "You go first. Leave the barren state." "Grand Elder, What about you? Jiang Chen's eyes narrowed. He had a bad feeling in his heart. I'll stand right here, the Green Sky Confucian scholar said in a deep voice. His expression was solemn, but he was very arrogant. I'll see who can walk through here. Green Sky Confucian scholar, the Desolation God's inheritance is of great importance. Don't mess around. Ask Jiang Chen to hand over the Desolation God's inheritance and share it with us. Otherwise, we'll flatten the Billow Academy. At that moment, several sages came together and stood in front of the Green Sky Confucian scholar. However, they did not dare to take another step forward. That was because they all knew how powerful the Green Sky Confucian scholar was. He was invincible below the immortal state. He would be able to kill anyone above the immortal state. As long as his cultivation had not reached the heavenly deterioration 5th stage, the Green Sky Confucian scholar was the king of all present. Amitabha. Master Mingwei had also arrived. He stood directly beside the Green Sky Confucian scholar. Then, he chanted the name of Buddha and said to the crowd, "The Desolation God's inheritance is for those who are fated to obtain it. Everyone, don't force it. Fate is fate, but you also need to have the strength to enjoy it. If you don't have the strength, you'll only have fate. I'm afraid you won't be able to enjoy it." An elder of a large sect from the underworld states said in a deep voice. "Master Mingwei, this has nothing to do with you. But it has something to do with me." Morning and Evening Wine raised his eyebrows in the distance. "Master Mingwei, listen to me." As soon as he said that, everyone's expression changed drastically. Everyone knew the name of Master Mingwei. He was an unparalleled sage monk. But now, such a sage monk actually listened to Morning and Evening Wine? Was this true? "Kid, how about becoming my disciple?" At this moment, an old man wearing tattered clothes and holding a wine gourd in his hand looked like a beggar. He whispered softly and took a sip of the strong wine. Then, he directly crossed the Green Sky Confucian scholar and Master Mingwei and stood directly in front of Jiang Chen. "What are you doing? How dare you?" In an instant, the Green Sky Confucian scholar was shocked. He waved his big hand, and like a golden eagle's claw, he rushed toward the beggar-like old man. "Confucian scholar, long time no see. Have you forgotten me?" the beggar-like old man said with a smile. In the blink of an eye, he shattered the Green Sky Confucian scholar's palm print. At the same time, Shugui, Wugui, and Mugui all landed beside the old man and said respectfully, "Greetings, big brother." "What? The leader of the 10 ghosts, Dao Ghost. Dao Ghost. Legend has it that he was killed by the martial pavilion a long time ago. How is he still alive?" everyone exclaimed. Even the Green Sky Confucian scholar's eyes widened. He could not believe that the beggar-like old man in front of him was actually the leader of the 10 ghosts, Dao Ghost. "Master, can you protect him?" At this moment, Dao Gui appeared at the side. He scratched his head and said awkwardly, "Jiang Chen, I'm sorry. Master warned me not to mention this to anyone." Jiang Chen was already dumbfounded. He stood rooted to the ground. He felt that today's matter had really blown up and attracted many experts. At the same time, Jiang Chen was also depressed. This Dao Gui's background was so great. He was actually the disciple of the leader of the 10 ghosts, Dao Ghost. In this barren state, there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers around him. "My elixir pavilion wants this person. Is the elixir pavilion trying to steal this person from my array pavilion? If this person is willing to join my array pavilion, he will be a distinguished guest." In the next moment, something even more surprising happened. The 2 elders of the array pavilion and elixir pavilion headquarters came together. Moreover, the moment they spoke, they wanted to protect Jiang Chen and pull Jiang Chen into the array pavilion and elixir pavilion. Chapter 324. Ever since he was reborn in the Qianzuan sect, Jiang Chen had always kept a low profile. However, in the eyes of others, Jiang Chen's so-called low profile was like the sun hanging high in the sky, extremely dazzling. As such, Jiang Chen's reputation and ability had been known by many since his rebirth. Among them, the Martial Pavilion, Elixir Pavilion, and Array Pavilion knew the most. The Martial Pavilion knew about Jiang Chen's ability because they had a grudge against him. The Elixir Pavilion and Array Pavilion knew about Jiang Chen's ability because of Lu Shan and Tong Sang. Previously, the upper echelons of the Elixir Pavilion and Array Pavilion headquarters had discussed and decided to rope in Jiang Chen at all costs. Now, they felt that the opportunity to rope in Jiang Chen had arrived. Sect Master, follow us back to the Elixir Pavilion. Tong Sang stood beside a Elixir Pavilion expert and said with a smile, "The Elixir Pavilion can protect you. Let's go to the Array Pavilion." "Sect Master, as long as you come to the Array Pavilion, we can make you the Deputy Pavilion Master," Lu Shan said hurriedly. At the same time, another Array Pavilion expert beside him added, "As long as you're willing to join the Array Pavilion, not only can we protect you, but we can also provide you with all cultivation resources." "Are you looking down on me, the Blue Sky Confucian Scholar?" At that moment, the Blue Sky Confucian Scholar was enraged. He had bet everything on Jiang Chen, even going as far as to become enemies with the Martial Pavilion. Now, the Array Pavilion and Elixir Pavilion were actually snatching him right in front of him? Did they think that he, the Blue Sky Confucian Scholar, was easy to bully? Or could it be that the Billowing Wave Institute and the Azure Sky Tribe were nothing in front of these people and forces? They couldn't even withstand a single blow, and were being looked down upon. "Kid, come with me. The world is so big. Wouldn't it be great to live a carefree life?" Dao Gui said, his eyes shining. "I can teach you everything. I'm a disciple of the Billow Academy," Jiang Chen said softly with a calm expression. "I'm also the sect master of the Chuanzuan sect." Those two sentences expressed Jiang Chen's intentions. He would not leave, nor would he join the Pill Pavilion, nor would he join the Array Pavilion, nor would he take Dao Ghost as his master. As Heavenly Stellar God King, how many people in this world had the qualifications to teach him? As the leader of a sect, how many sects and forces in the world could take him in? Therefore, even though Jiang Chen would leave the Billowing Wave Academy, he wouldn't join any other forces or even become a disciple. If that's the case, then, what a pity! Dao Ghost sighed and waved at Shugui and the others. "Let's go." As soon as they finished speaking, their figures flashed, and they immediately left. Even Dao Gui and Jianglu were forcibly taken away. Fortunately, Dao Gui and the others didn't seem to be interested in the Desolate God's inheritance, so they didn't make things difficult for him. After that, the people from the Array Pavilion and the Elixir Pavilion also left. They wouldn't force Jiang Chen, and they understood Jiang Chen's intentions. Since that was the case and he couldn't use it for himself, why should he protect it? "You two should leave as well." Jiang Chen looked at Lu Shan and Tong Sang and said, "This is not your fault. Sect leader, Lu Shan and Tong Sang were bitter. Their original intention was to help Jiang Chen. However, the two of them had just entered the headquarters of the Elixir Pavilion and Array Pavilion. They didn't have enough authority to protect Jiang Chen. "Mingwei, come back!" At that moment, in the distant sky, in the west, a ray of Buddhist light appeared. In the Buddhist light, a figure that was flickering with divine light appeared and waved at Master Mingwei. Master Mingwei couldn't help but sigh when he saw that. Then, he grabbed Morning and Evening Wine's shoulder and said, "Grandmaster, he has spoken. Jiang Chen, why don't you hand over the Rage God's inheritance?" Morning and Evening Wine said bitterly. Since his grandmaster had spoken, he couldn't stay. And Master Mingwei couldn't help Jiang Chen anymore. Now, if Jiang Chen wanted to leave safely, the only way was to hand over the Rage God's inheritance. However, could Jiang Chen hand it over? If he was willing to hand it over, why would Jiang Chen wait until now? "All of you leave for me. The person that I, Azure Sky Confucian Scholar, want to protect, I alone am enough." Azure Sky Confucian Scholar's voice was like thunder, shaking the clouds in the sky until they dissipated. "You leave for me too." The next moment, without waiting for Jiang Chen to react, he suddenly saw Azure Sky Confucian Scholar's palm strike toward him. Under this palm, the void behind Jiangchen opened up. His body was even thrown into a void passageway. Finally, the moment the void passageway closed, Jiangchen saw Azure Sky Confucian Scholar turn his head and smile through a gap, then charged out. Vaguely, Jiangchen could hear a series of explosions coming out, and even Azure Sky Confucian Scholar's long howl. Grand Ancestor! Jiangchen couldn't control his body and could only drift along with the spatial passageway. His eyes were bloodshot, his fists clenched tightly, his heart palpitating endlessly. As Heavenly Stellar Divine King, who in this world could make him personally call Grand Ancestor? As Heavenly Stellar Divine King, he climbed all the way up from a sea of corpses and blood. The blood in his heart had long turned cold. The so-called feelings were also long buried. In this life, if not for encountering these people, perhaps Jiangchen would have long been heartless. But now, Jiangchen's heart was moved. His emotions had exploded. Jiangchen never thought that in this life, there would actually be such an old man who was willing to risk his life for him. If you don't die, if I ascend to heaven, I'll definitely return you a future. Jiangchen roared in the void passageway, blood essence even dripping from his glabella. This was an oath. Half a day later, Barren State, inside Billow Academy, Jiangchen transported out of the void passageway. When he discovered that he had returned to Billow Academy, his expression could not help changing drastically. Because Jiangchen knew that he had become the target of everyone now. If he were to stay in Billow Academy would definitely be implicated. Although Billow Academy was very powerful and had a deep foundation, those sects and forces that wanted to deal with him were all extremely powerful. Those sects and forces would definitely not let Jiangchen go before they obtained the inheritance of the Desolation God. Moreover, all people and things related to Jiangchen would be implicated as well. Billow Academy is a good place. Jiangchen sighed. It's a pity that I have to leave. Where are you going? Stay. No one dares to touch you. Suddenly, a vicissitude voice rang in Jiangchen's ears. Jiangchen suddenly turned his head, a trace of astonishment flashing across his eyes. This was because he did not sense when such a person had appeared beside him. Don't be afraid. I am Billow Academy. At this moment, beside Jiangchen, there was an old man in a blue robe who was smiling at Jiangchen. He had a benevolent look, and there was a trace of turbidity in his eyes. However, deep within his pupils, there seemed to be a resplendent starry sky. And this person was the dean of Billow Academy, Billow Academy. The past deans of Billow Academy were all called Billow Academy. Their real names had lost their meaning the moment they became the dean of the academy. The two words Billow Academy were what they had to protect for the rest of their lives. Chapter 325. That old Confucian is already so old, but he still doesn't know his place, Bolan said softly. She seemed to be blaming Qin Kong Confucian, but it also gave people an inexplicable feeling. Senior, I've received the inheritance of the Desolate God, Jiangchen said softly. If I stay, I'll implicate the Billow Academy. So what? When has the Billow Academy ever been afraid of anyone? Bolan said with a smile. She looked up at the sky, and her smile gradually disappeared. A sharp killing intent rose from her body. She said coldly, The magnificent world is also the heart and life of the Billow Academy. Those who dare to come, just kill them, Bolan said. Go back and cultivate. Other things have nothing to do with you. Is it really okay? Jiangchen frowned. He was a little worried. Because this time, the Billow Academy had to face more than just the martial pavilion. The Middle Ground Dynasty, the Nine-Li Dynasty, the Humanoid Dragon Tribe, and even the Supreme Sword Sect. Any one of these top sects and forces on the godless continent was enough to compete with or even suppress the Billow Academy. Now, the Billow Academy had to face so many top forces all of a sudden. Could the Billow Academy withstand it? If they couldn't withstand it, would the Billowing Waves Academy be destroyed? Do you know why the top 10 academies have never fallen since ancient times? Bolan suddenly asked. Jiangchen couldn't help but be struck dumb. Then, Jiangchen thought about it carefully. He couldn't help but feel a little shocked. Just like what Bolan said, the top 10 academies, even the ones ranked at the bottom, had never fallen since the day they were established. Then, was there some secret hidden in this? Maybe it was this secret that allowed the top 10 academies to stand tall in the barren state. Confucian Grand Ancestor, Jiangchen said worriedly. Him? Ha! Bolan pursed her lips. Do they have God Realm cultivators? No. Jiangchen shook his head. Do they have Heaven's Blight experts? Bolan asked. No. Jiangchen shook his head again. Bolan rolled her eyes and said snappily, Then what are you worried about? I don't have to worry. Jiangchen was stunned and confused. One had to know that outside the wilderness god Dao field, there were as many saints as there were clouds, and there was no lack of great saint-level top powerhouses. And the blue sky Confucian scholar was only one person. With the strength of a single person and the same cultivation realm, no matter how strong he was, it would be difficult for him to remain safe. It was just like how Jiangchen had been in the past. As a god king, he was extremely powerful, yet hadn't he still been ganged up on and killed by 36 master gods? I'm invincible below the god plane. I didn't just say that casually, Bolan said softly. He is a genius of the barren state. After she finished speaking, Wave left. She soared into the sky and headed out of the Wave Academy. In a few breaths, he disappeared from Jiangchen's sight. Jiangchen stood in the same place. After hesitating for a while, he returned to the cave house. As soon as he returned, Qin Kong Xianwei appeared in front of Jiangchen and asked, Are you all right? Jiangchen was confused again. He asked, Shouldn't you ask the Grand Ancestor if he's all right? Ask him? Qin Kong Xianwei was stunned for a moment. What can happen to the Grand Ancestor? Jiangchen was speechless. He thought to himself, You guys really trust the blue sky Confucian scholar very much. Then, Jiangchen didn't say anything. He sat down cross-legged and began to cultivate. Although he had comprehended the supreme sword intent, he needed to continuously comprehend it after comprehending it to comprehend the profoundness within. Moreover, the supreme sword intent was extremely domineering. The slightest carelessness would cause his soul to collapse. When Jiangchen comprehended the supreme sword intent, he could only use the 10,000 transformations heavenly lamp. Otherwise, with his current comprehension and attainments in Sword Tao, he wouldn't be able to comprehend this sword intent at all. Time slowly passed, until 3 days later, on this day, someone saw the blue sky Confucian scholar return. He was covered in blood and his aura was dispirited. His forehead was cracked, and one could see his soul sitting cross-legged in his mind. However, he was holding 6 saint skulls in his hand. These were his spoils of war, his glory. As expected of the Billowing Wave Academy's guardian, I'm invincible below the immortal realm. Below the immortal realm, 1 for 1, only the Grand Ancestor of the Confucian scholar can win. The people of the Billowing Wave Academy were excited and exhilarated. Some even shouted the blue sky Confucian scholar's name. After the blue sky Confucian scholar returned, he didn't look for Jiangchen. Instead, he went into seclusion to cultivate. Qin Kong Xianwei stood beside Jiangchen and said softly, The Grand Ancestor is back. It's good that you're back, Jiangchen said softly. When he opened and closed his eyes, there seemed to be a green blade of grass floating in his eyes. There was nothing special about the blade of grass. It was like a weed, but its leaves swayed and emitted a green light. There were 3 leaves and 1 blade of grass. It was as if it was the only thing in the world. What is this? Qin Kong Xianwei asked. Supreme sword intent, Jiangchen said softly. Baron. The desolate god's inheritance? Qin Kong Xianwei asked curiously. Yes. Jiangchen nodded. Then, he couldn't help but frown. This was because he sensed a few extremely powerful auras outside his cave abode. Among these auras there were a few that Jiangchen was very familiar with. They were Li Fingzi and the others. They actually entered the Billowing Wave Academy. Jiangchen narrowed his eyes and stood up. Then, he opened the door of his cave and walked out. Jiangchen, hand over the desolate god's inheritance. Immediately, Li Fengzi shouted. His eyes shone brightly and the shadow of a true dragon floated behind him. He held the dragon scale armor in his left hand and the dragon scale reverse sword in his right. He looked like a god of war. Huang Jiucheng, Zhuge Taojin, the Jiuli Prince, and the others stood beside him. Since you can enter the Billowing Wave Academy, it means that the Billowing Wave Academy has reached some kind of agreement with the forces that you belong to, right? Jiangchen raised his eyebrows and asked. Yes, so what? If we defeat you without becoming a martial sage, you will have to hand over the desolate god's inheritance. This is the agreement that we have reached with the Billowing Wave Academy, the Jiuli Prince said. Hearing this, Jiangchen couldn't help but laugh. His heart that was in his throat also calmed down. Since these top forces had reached an agreement with the Billowing Wave Academy, it meant that these top forces were afraid of the Billowing Wave Academy. This also meant that the Billowing Wave Academy could still protect Jiangchen. However, the Billowing Wave Academy didn't dare to act recklessly. They could only reach an agreement with these top forces. This agreement was really good for Jiangchen. So, will it be one-on-one or will all of you come at me together? Jiangchen asked. If it was one-on-one, Jiangchen wouldn't have to worry about anything. However, if all of them came at him together, Jiangchen would really want to curse them. After all, Li Fengzi and the others were the top geniuses of their respective prefectures. If all of them came at him together, Jiangchen wouldn't be able to stop them unless he used a forbidden technique. One-on-one, Huang Jiucheng said. This is the agreement. We won't break the rules. Then, all right, Jiangchen said. Then, he turned around and returned to the cave abode. Immediately after, the door of the cave abode closed. The group of people were stunned. Chapter 326. Jiangchen? What do you mean? Don't you dare to fight? The prince of Jiuli tribe shouted angrily. Come out! Does the agreement state that I have to accept the challenge? Jiangchen's voice came from the cave. Everyone was speechless when they heard that. In the evil agreement between the Billow Academy and the big sects, it didn't state that Jiangchen had to accept the challenge. Jiangchen could choose not to fight. If he didn't fight, Jiangchen wouldn't lose. If he didn't lose, they would never get the inheritance of the desolate god. This was a loophole. Li Fengzi and the others were speechless when they saw the closed door of the cave. Although they could enter the Billow Academy, they couldn't act recklessly. Go back and report to the elders in the sect. Ask them to amend the agreement. It must be amended. After a few breaths, everyone left. Some of them sent messages to the higher-ups of the sections. However, the agreement couldn't be made overnight. It needed to be discussed by the higher-ups of all sections. As a result, 10 days had passed by the time the agreement was amended. On this day, Li Fengzi and the others came to Jiangchen's cave again. They wanted to force Jiangchen to come out of the cave with the agreement. However, as soon as Jiangchen showed up in front of them, their pupils suddenly contracted, and their hair stood on end. This was because Jiangchen looked ordinary at the moment. Even the brilliance in his eyes had been restrained. He looked like an ordinary person with a smile on his face. He stood in front of everyone and said softly, Who's first? You. What's wrong with you? Li Fengzi frowned. He couldn't sense Jiangchen's cultivation. It was as if Jiangchen had really become a cripple. Your cultivation has been destroyed? What happened to you? It can't be. It can't be. Everyone was confused. They couldn't believe that Jiangchen's cultivation had really disappeared. Don't you know how to return to one's natural state? Jiangchen rolled his eyes and said, It seems that you guys are still used to me showing off. Wang. The moment he finished speaking, a terrifying power of heaven and earth exploded from Jiangchen's body. Immediately after, the sound of a sword rang out from his body. He stood tall and straight, like a sharp sword that had never left its sheath. Supreme sword intent! During this period of time, you have been cultivating the supreme sword intent. Huang Jiuchong and the rest looked terrible. Facing Jiangchen was like facing a murderous sword. It was as if as long as Jiangchen made a move, tens of thousands of swords would shoot out. Supreme sword intent is a concept related to the way of the sword. It can only be comprehended and not fixed. Jiangchen said. Those who say that they cultivate the unparalleled sword intent, you guys don't understand the way of the sword. Even if I give this desolation to you, you guys won't be able to comprehend it. Even if we can't comprehend it, there are plenty of people in the inner sect who can. The Jiuli prince raised his eyebrows. Stop resisting. Your cultivation is too low now. You're no match for us. Let me give you a piece of advice. According to the agreement, even if we kill you in a one-on-one fight, the Billow Academy can't do anything to us. Xianyuan Changfeng said with murderous intent in his eyes. Jiangchen chuckled and shrugged nonchalantly. As long as you guys can kill me, I'll give you my life. With that, Jiangchen stood up and looked at the sky. Then, he silently walked toward the Tribulation Dojo of the Billow Academy. A group of people followed him. When they arrived at the Tribulation Dojo, they were shocked to find that the place was already filled with tribulation clouds. In the middle of the dojo, below the tribulation clouds, Jiangchen stood there valiantly with a faint smile on his face. That smile was a little unruly, a little arrogant, and a little confident. Everything is ready. It's time to break through, Jiangchen said softly. His body shook and a few more tribulation clouds appeared in the sky above his head. The people of the Billow Academy were already used to it. They looked at Jiangchen with a numb expression. Occasionally, someone would say, "He's going to undergo tribulation clouds again." To Huang Jiuchong and the others, this was not a normal thing. When ordinary people underwent tribulation clouds, they would at most go through one tribulation cloud at a time. However, Jiangchen attracted so many tribulation clouds at once. How many tribulations was he going to undergo? Are you courting death? Huang Jiuchong frowned. Hand over the supreme sword intent, and you won't have to die. Why bother? We are only here for the supreme sword intent. Why must you seek your own death? Li Fingzi sighed and said, Hand over the supreme sword intent, and my Central Continent dynasty will promise not to harm your life. Are you guys idiots? Jiangchen glanced at Li Fingzi and the others. Then, he opened his arms as if he was welcoming something. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, the tribulation clouds in the sky moved violently. Bolts of lightning exploded like a waterfall of lightning, drowning Jiangchen in the blink of an eye. The red lotus karmic fire burned, the 5 elemental radiance flickered, and a strange phenomenon appeared. Golden lotuses covered the ground. The violent aura of tribulation clouds represented the destructive lightning, and it completely exploded. The people of the Billow Academy were very calm. Some of them even started a bet in the distance. They were betting on how long Jiangchen would take to pass the tribulation clouds. Li Fingzi and the others were dumbfounded. How could there be such a bet? Even if there was a bet, shouldn't it be on whether Jiangchen could pass the tribulation clouds and not on how long it would take? One had to know that even Li Fingzi and the others did not have the confidence to pass through so many violent tribulation clouds. 6 Unity Art. Cultivate 2 physical souls and 4 spiritual souls, condense the Tao seed, directly connect to the spiritual altar, and strive for the peak of the great Tao. At this moment, under the sky full of lightning, Jiangchen's mind was clear. He circulated the 6 Unity Art, and used the tribulation clouds to cleanse his physical soul and spiritual soul. This time, Jiangchen wanted to pass all the tribulation clouds in one go, and cultivate the 6 Unity Art to perfection. This was because Jiangchen knew that he did not have much time left. Now, the people he had to face were at least in the lower heaven realm, and the highest was a quasi-sage. If he did not raise his cultivation level and remained in the supremacy realm, he would be attacked. Lightning continued to fall, the red lotus karmic fire burned, and the 5 elemental force was like a tsunami. All of this was on Jiangchen's body. Beside him was like the eye of a storm. The tribulation clouds and lightning power inside were simply terrifying to the extreme. Cracks even appeared in the void around him. It was as if the lightning was going to shatter this space. However, no matter how much lightning struck him, Jiangchen remained unmoved. Although his saint body was unknown, his recovery ability was amazing. His physical body was as strong as a boulder. His undying bird Dao soul was also crying, protecting Jiangchen's foundation and healing his injuries. 2 hours later, when the cold clouds disappeared, and the lightning in the sky dissipated, Jiangchen appeared in front of the crowd, safe and sound. At the same time, a long cry came from his body, and a wisp of earth chi appeared on his body. Complete Supremacy Realm, first step into the Earth Realm, Jiangchen whispered. His Dao seed had broken through the limit and reached an unknown level. Jiangchen only knew that the moment he entered the Earth Realm, the Dao seed attracted the power of Earth into his body. Even at that moment, with the help of the Doctrine Seed, Jiangchen managed to reach the middle level of the Earth Realm after stepping into the Earth Realm. Chapter 327. The Earth Realm was the Qi of Tao, the energy of the underworld, and the origin of the Earth. Once a cultivator entered the Earth Realm, it was equivalent to a metamorphosis. That was because only from the Earth Realm onwards could one truly come into contact with the Tao, understand the Tao, and obtain its power. The amount of Tao power one could obtain depended on the level of one's Taoist seed. The higher the level of one's Taoist seed, the easier it was to understand the Tao and obtain more Tao power. For example, Jiangchen's Taoist seed was at an unknown level, but it was terrifyingly high. After he broke through to the Earth Realm, the Tao power continuously rushed into his body and merged with his cultivation. That was why he broke through to the intermediate level of the Earth Realm. Intermediate level of the Earth Realm? What's going on? He leaped up? Everyone exclaimed, their eyes flashing with shock. There were many geniuses present, and even more monstrous geniuses. They were the top geniuses of their respective continents. However, when they had achieved the Earth Realm, they hadn't skipped a grade like Jiangchen had. Everyone, let's begin. At that moment, Jiangchen had an unruly smile on his face. His eyes shone with arrogance and confidence. Being at the intermediate level of the Earth Realm gave Jiangchen the confidence to fight these geniuses head-on. I'll go first. Let me go first. At that moment, Li Fengzi and the others hurriedly spoke, requesting to be the first to fight Jiangchen. That was because the agreement was very clear. Whoever defeated Jiangchen first would get the ultimate sword intent, and they could not snatch it. In their eyes, even if Jiangchen was at the intermediate level of the Earth Realm, he was no match for them. Whoever attacked first would get the ultimate sword intent. Jiangchen chuckled. He thought to himself that these guys were really treating him like a piece of soft tofu. I'll go first. At that moment, Huang Jiucheng stepped out. He scanned the crowd and said coldly, "Does anyone have a problem with that?" The moment he said that, everyone frowned. Their faces were filled with displeasure. However, what was surprising was that no one objected. Even Jiangchen was slightly puzzled. Since when did the words of a 9th-level Emperor Realm cultivator carry so much weight? Prince of the Relong Realm, I don't mind giving you some face. Li Fengzi raised his eyebrows and clenched his fists. He was obviously unhappy. The 9 Li Prince, Han Jiang, Zhuge Taojin, and the others were also displeased. However, just as Li Fengzi said, the status of the Dragon Prince was too high. Unless it was absolutely necessary, no one was willing to provoke the Draconic clan. Moreover, among the people present, a 9th-level Emperor Realm cultivator wasn't the strongest. With that, everyone had an idea. They wanted to let Huang Jiucheng make the first move to test Jiangchen's strength. Just take it as a vanguard. Huang Jiucheng, are you sure about today's battle? Jiangchen chuckled. Today, all the geniuses are here. If you lose, aren't you afraid that your reputation will be ruined? What do I have to be afraid of? Huang Jiucheng raised his eyebrows. I can be arrogant, and I can accept my defeat wholeheartedly. Then let's try. Jiangchen said softly. The moment he finished speaking, he charged forward like a bolt of golden lightning. In the blink of an eye, Jiangchen arrived in front of Huang Jiucheng. His fist was like a golden millstone as it smashed down on Huang Jiucheng's head. Roar! Huang Jiucheng roared. His voice was like a dragon's roar. Dragon chi circled around his body and his dragon aura surged. He also threw out a punch. His fist was like a dragon's claw and his entire body was covered in dragon scales. The dragon's might was vast and mighty, as if it was going to suppress everything. Li Fingzi and the others were shocked. They could feel the terrifying power of Huang Jiucheng's punch. They started to worry. If Huang Jiucheng really defeated Jiangchen, the unparalleled sword intent would belong to Huang Jiucheng. They could ask Jiangchen for the unparalleled sword intent, but they couldn't just ask Huang Jiucheng for it. After all, Huang Jiucheng was the prince of the humanoid dragon tribe. Destroy! However, to everyone's surprise, Jiangchen only said the word, destroy, in a low voice. Then they saw a cyan glazed radiance erupting from his fist. It was the power of the earth. The power of the earth exploded like a whirlpool and instantly crushed Huang Jiucheng's fist into nothingness. Just after this, Jiangchen retreated quickly, while he shook his hands on the way, and the power of black and yellow turned into a golden longbow. After retreating for 100 miles, Jiangchen steadied himself. The longbow in his hand shook and the power of heaven and earth turned into sharp arrows. 10,000 arrows! Jiangchen shouted loudly. In an instant, tens of thousands of sharp arrows were shot out. They blotted out the sky and covered the earth. It was like a storm. How can you do anything to me with such petty tricks? Huang Jiucheng roared and the shadow of a real dragon appeared behind him. A dragon's aura swept across the sky and shattered the tens of thousands of arrows. In the next moment, without waiting for Jiangchen to attack again, Huang Jiucheng rushed out and a terrifying dragon's aura exploded. Under the dragon's aura, the space seemed to have been sealed. Many people found it difficult to move. It was difficult to even move a finger. It was the same for Jiangchen. Under the dragon's aura, Jiangchen's movements became slow. Even the wind in the space stopped. This was the dragon's aura sealing technique. As expected of the Draconian clan, their dragon's aura and dragon's aura have reached the point of perfection. They can seal the space. The Jiuli prince said softly with a hint of disdain in his eyes. Li Fingzi also curled his lips. After all, the foundation of the Zhongzhou dynasty was the dragon's aura and dragon's aura. In Li Fingzi's opinion, the dragon's aura that the Draconian clan had was not as powerful as the dragon's aura of the Zhongzhou dynasty. At that moment, Jiangchen's figure faded in the sky as if he had disintegrated. In the next moment, the crowd saw 6 clones that looked exactly like Jiangchen. Birds 6 flashes. Along with a loud shout, the 6 clones looked like divine birds that were shining brightly. They swooped down and headed toward Huang Jiucheng in a strange way. Huang Jiucheng was fearless. He opened his hands wide and punched out, trying to destroy the 6 clones. However, when he was fully focused on the 6 clones, a black shadow quietly approached him and appeared behind him without a sound. Huang Jiucheng sensed something and quickly turned around. However, it was too late. In front of him, Jiangchen's real body was looking at him with a smile. At the same time, one of Jiangchen's fingers landed on Huang Jiucheng's glabella. You've lost, Jiangchen said with a smile. If he used more strength, his finger would have pierced through Huang Jiucheng's glabella and killed him. Thank you for showing mercy. Huang Jiucheng had a strange look on his face. He knew that Jiangchen had gone easy on him this time. Otherwise, Jiangchen's finger would have pierced through the back of his head and destroyed his spiritual soul before he could even turn around. Chapter 328. As soon as Huang Jiucheng finished speaking, Jiangchen's 6 clones suddenly shot out and swooped down like 6 phoenixes. But at the last moment, they disappeared into nothingness. During this time, Huang Jiucheng could clearly feel that the power of the 6 clones was enough to suppress him. When you become a saint, I'm afraid you'll be the second blue sky scholar, Huang Jiucheng commented. He was completely convinced of Jiang Chen's strength, and was even fearful of him. The second blue sky scholar? Jiang Chen said softly. Then, he smiled and said, that might not be the case. The blue sky scholar was very strong. He had not become a god, but he had the strength to compete with a godly state expert. With the blue sky scholar's strength, he could be considered one of the top saints in the entire godless continent, let alone the barren state. Huang Jiucheng's evaluation of Jiang Chen was already very high. It could even be said that it was the highest evaluation. But to Jiang Chen, if he became a saint in the future, what was a godly state cultivator? Even a Deva fifth blight powerhouse was merely a wisp of smoke in front of him. Huang Jiucheng lost. This is a little tricky. At this moment, Li Fengzi and the others had ugly expressions and frowned. This was because they more or less knew how strong Huang Jiucheng was. But now, Huang Jiucheng had been defeated. And from the looks of it, he had been thoroughly defeated. Since Huang Jiucheng had been defeated, what would happen when they fought Jiang Chen? Previously, Li Fengzi and the others were worried that if Huang Jiucheng won, the ultimate sword intent would belong to him. But now, Li Fengzi and the others were worried about how many of them could defeat Jiang Chen. Some of them even felt guilty, and had a bad feeling. Don't tell me none of us can defeat Jiang Chen? Someone murmured in a low voice. He couldn't believe what he had just said. However, this feeling was simply too intense. Some people were secretly observing the expressions of Li Fengzi and the others. They discovered that these strongest geniuses also had extremely solemn expressions. If you think you're weaker than an Emperor Realm cultivator, don't challenge me, said Jiang Chen. It's just a waste of time. Can the two of us attack together? At this moment, Xianyuan Changfeng and Xianyuan Changkong took a step forward. Ever since the two of them started cultivating, no matter what they did, they were always together. 1 against 2. Although it was bullying, it was a common occurrence for the two Mudda River cultivators. Come at me together, of course, Jiang Chen said mockingly. However, if the two of you attack me together and lose to me, where will you put your face? As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of the two people changed. Their expressions became strange, and there was even a hint of struggle in the depths of their eyes. Just as Jiang Chen had said, if the two of them were defeated by Jiang Chen even though they joined forces, they would lose all their face. We'll fight another day. We don't want this supreme sword intent anymore, Xianyuan Changfeng said softly, then retreated to the side. It was obvious that the two Mudda River cultivators cared more about their reputation. Moreover, the Xianyuan clan was a powerful clan that had a long history. The Xianyuan clan had a deep foundation and did not lack any supreme inheritances. This time, the two Mudda River cultivators' main purpose of coming here was to broaden their horizons. Brother, let me go, said Li Fengyuan. He looked at Li Fengzi as if he was asking for his opinion. Just try. Don't force yourself, said Li Fengzi. Your strength is on par with Huang Jiucheng's. If Huang Jiucheng lost, you definitely won't be a match for Jiang Chen. Brother, we haven't fought yet. Why do you say that? Li Fengyuan was unconvinced and said, We should let them see the strength of the great princes of the Zhongzhou Empire. Ha! A few of the great princes of the Zhongzhou Empire died in the Desolation God Arena, someone said disdainfully. There are so many princes in the Zhongzhou Empire, but only Li Fengzi is capable. As for you, in our eyes, you're just a clown. What did you say? Li Fengyuan was immediately furious. He glanced sideways, but when he saw the person who spoke, his expression couldn't help but turn gloomy. His body couldn't help but tremble slightly. This was because the person who had spoken was Zhuge Taojin, the third disciple of the Heaven and Earth Pavilion. Jiang Chen, I'm here on behalf of the Heaven and Earth Pavilion, said Zhuge Taojin. He ignored Li Fengyuan and looked at Jiang Chen. If I defeat you, the Heaven and Earth Pavilion doesn't want the Supreme Sword intent, but you must join the Heaven and Earth Pavilion. Okay. Jiang Chen nodded indifferently and said, It's the same wherever I go. With that, Jiang Chen raised his head and looked at the sky. After a dozen breaths, he sighed and said, I can't stay in the barren state for long. I'll leave sooner or later. Jiang Chen! Fight! At that moment, Li Fengyuan roared and took a step forward. His dragon's breath was violent, and a mighty dragon's might erupted. Jiang Chen's expression was calm. His figure flashed and turned into 6 doppelgangers. 6 flashes. The 6 doppelgangers swooped down from the sky like 6 phoenixes. They carried the power of thunder and a terrifying power of the earth. This was a power unique to the earth realm. Dragon Shadow! Li Fengyuan shouted, and several dragon shadows appeared beside him. They were like green dragons and rushed toward Jiang Chen's 6 doppelgangers. However, doppelgangers met doppelgangers. In just one exchange, Li Fengyuan's dragon shadow doppelgangers were all shattered. Immediately after, the 6 phoenix-like doppelgangers pierced through Li Fengyuan's body, leaving 6 bloody holes on his body. One of the bloody holes was just a few inches away from piercing through Li Fengyuan's forehead. Li Fengzi, I respect you as a hero and an ambitious person. That's why I gave you face. Jiang Chen said softly. Otherwise, I would have killed this person. Li Fengyuan, come back. Li Fengzi said softly, then cupped his hands at Jiang Chen and said, Thank you. Back then, Li Fengyuan had sent people to kill Wakako, Jianglu, and the others in the desolate God Square for no reason. This matter had already made him an enemy of Jiang Chen. If Li Fengzi hadn't intervened and settled this matter, Li Fengyuan would have been a dead man now. However, although the matter back then had been settled, Jiang Chen still had resentment in his heart. And Li Fengzi also knew this, so now he was thanking Jiang Chen. Do you dare to kill me? I am a prince of the Central State Dynasty. If you dare to kill me, the Central State Dynasty's army will definitely arrive at the Billowing Wave Academy in 3 days. Li Fengyuan shouted angrily. Enough! Don't you feel ashamed? Li Fengzi angrily rebuked, coldly glancing at Li Fengyuan and said, Get lost! Brother! Li Fengyuan stared, as if he couldn't believe that his brother would not leave him any face in front of so many people. Chapter 329. Emperors can achieve great things. You are a disgrace to the middle ground imperial family. Li Fengzi shouted angrily. Then, he looked at the crowd and smiled. I'm sorry, everyone. I've made a fool of myself. Li Fengzi, you are quite a character. Unfortunately, the throne of the middle ground imperial family is not yours. Xianyuan Changfeng said mockingly. No matter how strong you are, no matter how courageous and powerful you are, you will only be ranked 2nd. Your brother, the first prince, can ascend to the throne and become the emperor of the Central Plains Empire even if he does nothing. That's my family's business. Li Fengzi smiled. His expression did not change, but his hands were clenched tightly in his sleeves. Obviously, Li Fengzi was unhappy. However, he would never say it out loud. The supreme sword intent should have been mine. Today, I will return it. At this moment, the red-robed youth from the Supreme Sword Sect walked out. He held a green wooden sword in his hand and pointed it at Jiang Chen. Do you dare to fight with my sword principle? The Supreme Sword Sect masters were all supreme experts in sword principle. It could be said that if the Supreme Sword Sect's people said that they were 2nd in sword principle, it would be difficult for anyone in the world to say that they were 1st. Of course, there were exceptions. Previously, if Jiang Chen had not interfered, the Supreme Desolation Sword Intent would have been the red-robed youth's. At this moment, the red-robed youth's eyes were filled with killing intent. He could not wait to cut Jiang Chen into pieces and swallow him alive. However, he was very cautious. He knew that Jiang Chen was very strong, so he wanted to fight with Jiang Chen with his own strength. Fight with my sword principle? Jiang Chen said softly. The Supreme Sword Sect's sword principle is not necessarily the best in the world. What a joke! How many sword cultivators in the world dare to speak so arrogantly in front of the Supreme Sword Sect? The red-robed youth rebuked angrily. Then, he looked serious and said, Supreme Sword Sect's Lin Qishan, Please enlighten me. You are not asking for enlightenment. You are asking for death, Jiangchen said. With a wave of his hand, Chasing Heaven appeared in his hand. In an instant, everyone's eyes locked onto Chasing Sky. The greed in the eyes of a few people was not concealed at all. This was because Sky Chaser's name had shaken the world. It was the weapon of deity King Tianchen. No matter if it was an ordinary cultivator or a sword cultivator, their love for chasing after the heavens was unimaginable. Stop, sword style! One stop! At that moment, Lin Qishan shouted and dashed out like a ray of light. The long sword in his hand was roaring like a dragon. It was accompanied by rays of sword light that seemed indestructible. In the blink of an eye, he rushed to 100 feet in front of Jiangchen. His figure suddenly stopped, and the long sword in his hand seemed to have stopped. In the next second, the sword aura erupted from the motionless sword. Like a long rainbow, it shot straight towards Jiangchen. Supreme Sword Sex Halting Sword Style. It's said that every time it stops, it kills one person, and 10 times it stops without leaving a trace. Above 10 halts, all saints will perish. Many people had heard of the Supreme Sword Sex Halting Sword Style, but they had never seen it before. Now that they saw Lin Qingshan's halting sword style, it naturally attracted everyone's attention. However, in the next moment, the long sword in Jiang Chen's hand vibrated gently in front of him. A ray of sword light turned into ripples and spread out. In an instant, Lin Qingshan's halting sword style was dispersed. Second stop! Lin Qishan did not hesitate. His figure flashed on the spot, and then landed on top of Jiang Chen's head. Then, his figure and the long sword in his hand stopped again. This stop lasted for 3 breaths of time. 3 breaths of time. To Jiang Chen, there were thousands of ways to defeat Lin Qishan. However, Jiang Chen did not do that. He wanted to see how strong the Supreme Sword Sex Halting Sword Style was. It's coming! Second stop! Mountain stop! At that moment, the crowd exclaimed. On Lin Qingshan's long sword, an illusory mountain appeared. Then, the illusory mountain collapsed. A sharp sword aura erupted from the illusory mountain and slashed down at Jiang Chen. Interesting. Each stop is stronger than the last. It's borrowing some kind of power. There's the power of heaven and earth in it. Jiang Chen thought to himself. If this halting sword style could be executed for more than 10 stops, Jiang Chen felt that he would lose without a doubt. However, the power of the second stop was not something Jiang Chen cared about. Jiang Chen's Chasing Heaven vibrated gently in front of him again. A sword flower appeared and then spread out, turning into 6 rays of sword light and shattering Lin Qingshan's second stop. At the same time, Lin Qingshan's figure moved again and landed on Jiang Chen's left side. Then, he suddenly stopped. This stop lasted for another 3 breaths of time. This time, Jiang Chen still did not move and allowed Lin Qishan to execute the third stop. As soon as he stopped, the crowd saw a giant beast appear. It raised its head and roared. Then a sword radiance fell from the sky and hit the top of Jiang Chen's head. He's dead! What a fast sword light! Jiang Chen's head was hit! Did it shatter? Many people exclaimed. Only Li Fingzi and the others were calm. It was because they saw very clearly that Lin Qingshan's third stop sword light had already disappeared 3 inches away from Jiang Chen's head. At the same time, Chasing Heaven rushed up and turned into a meteor, shattering the giant beast phantom in the air. The third stop was broken. So strong! Just middle-level Earth realm, but he can easily resolve the first 3 stops of the Supreme Sword Sex Halting Sword Style. Amazing! Lin Qishan is a quasi-sage. With this strength, he actually can't suppress Jiang Chen. Under the exclamations, Lin Qingshan's expression became very ugly. His cultivation was much higher than Jiang Chen's, and he even executed the third stop in a row. In the end, he did not hurt Jiang Chen at all. To him, this was simply a humiliation. Wind. At this moment, Lin Qishan seemed to be really angry. With a long roar, a gale roared out beside him. Looking carefully, that was not a gale in the true sense, But his Tao spirit. Jiang Qin stared at the Gale Tao spirit, secretly thinking that it was a little tricky. The Gale Tao spirit had always belonged to the strongest Tao spirit since ancient times. It was just that since ancient times, people who possessed the Gale Tao spirit had never been strong. Therefore, this Gale Tao spirit had never entered the top 10 of the Tao spirit list. However, no one would doubt the power of the Gale Tao spirit because this Tao spirit had a very special ability: acceleration. 4th stop. 5th stop. 6th stop. Under the support of the Gale Tao spirit, Lin Qingshan's attacks became even more ferocious and extremely fast. He did not stop at all. His movements were like flowing water. In one breath, he executed the 3rd stop in a row. In the 3rd stop, the sword light turned into the sun, moon, and stars. Light shone in all directions, directly drowning Jiang Qin. However, this time, Jiang Qin couldn't stay calm anymore. His arms shook, and chasing heaven slashed out 16 sword lights in a row. Each sword was like a dragon. And when it collided with the 3rd stop sword lights, the sword lights that Jiang Qin slashed out turned into stone dragons. Chapter 330. Boom! Boom! 16 consecutive explosions were heard. The 16 stone dragons were shattered. At the same time, the sun, moon, and stars from the 3 halts disappeared. "You're forcing me!" Lin Qingshan was furious. The 3 halts did not hurt Jiang Qin at all. Moreover, there were so many people watching from all around, making him feel like he had lost all face. "If you can perform more than 10 halts, I can admit defeat. The supreme sword will belong to you," Jiang Qin said softly, but his expression was serious. Jiang Qin had to admit that Lin Qingshan was very strong. His attainments in the way of the sword were not comparable to his peers. 10 halts? Then I'll show you! Lin Qingshan's eyes were red. The acceleration effect of the wild wind Dao soul was activated. His body moved horizontally in the air and stopped continuously. Every time he paused, his aura would increase by a notch, and a terrifying sword light would erupt. As for Jiang Qin, he was still standing where he was. He looked calm. Compared to his previous serious look, the current Jiang Qin looked a little bit calm. "Lin Qingshan has lost." At that moment, Li Fengzi said softly and shook his head. "He's not Jiang Qin's match after all." "What? Lost? Impossible! He's already performed 9 halts." A few people did not believe it and refuted Li Fengzi. However, the 9 Li Crown Prince, who was next to them, sneered. He said, "Since Jiang Qin knew that Lin Qingshan would lose if he used more than 10 halts, how could he give Lin Qingshan a chance to use more than 10 halts? But he didn't move." Someone frowned. Boom! However, as soon as he finished speaking, the crowd saw Jiang Qin, who had been standing where he had been, suddenly explode and turn into a rain of light. At the same time, the sword ray in this part of the sky surged and a huge sun appeared out of thin air. If one took a closer look, one would see that it was Jiang Qin in the sun. The power of heaven and earth was roaring and the sky chaser in his hand was like a real dragon. Dragon raises its head. Accompanied by a long roar, Jiang Qin slashed down with chasing heaven. Following that, he drew an arc upwards. A sword beam rose from bottom to top like a true dragon raising its head. Roar! Faintly, everyone heard a dragon roar that shook the heavens. Dragon raises its head? What kind of move is this? Moves of the sword Dao? Which sect was he from? I've heard of it before. Many people were puzzled, as they couldn't figure out dragon raises its head style and origin. However, they could feel that the power contained in this sword ray that was like a real dragon raising its head was simply terrifying. At the same time, Lin Qingshan's figure stopped in the air. His aura was almost comparable to that of a sage. 10th stop! Lin Qingshan let out a long howl and stopped. The sword light in his hand dissipated, but then it exploded again. However, before he could slash with his sword, a sword ray in the shape of a dragon head came from below. It opened its huge dragon mouth and swallowed him. Boom! In the next moment, with a loud explosion, everyone saw Lin Qingshan fall from the sky. The long sword in his hand broke, and he couldn't perform the 10th stop. If it weren't for the Gale Daoist spirit, he wouldn't even have the chance to perform the 9th stop. Li Fengzi pursed his lips. The stopping sword style has its flaws after all. But what's up with Jiang Chen's sword Dao? That dragon raises its head, doesn't seem like a martial technique. Jiuli Prince said with a frown. It's a martial technique, but it's a divine technique, Huang Jiuchong said in a low voice. His understanding of the Dao is too deep. With his Earth Realm cultivation, he can already use part of the Dao's power, which is enough for him to perform a divine technique. The moment he said that, everyone was shocked. Martial techniques were divided into ranks. The higher the rank, the more powerful they were, but the stricter the conditions to perform them. Divine techniques were above ordinary martial techniques. In order to perform a divine technique, one's cultivation had to be in the Earth Realm. Secondly, one had to use the Dao's power. Of course, there were people in the crowd who had mastered divine techniques. These people had powerful backgrounds, and their sects didn't lack divine techniques. However, there weren't many people who could perform a divine technique. Some people even found it difficult to perform a divine technique after becoming a martial sage. This Supreme Sword intent has nothing to do with your Supreme Sword sect anymore. At this moment, Jiang Chen put away his chasing heaven sword and stood in the air. His hair and robe danced in the wind, and he looked like a sword immortal. His eyes were clear, and he smiled at the crowd. I'm afraid those who can't perform a divine technique don't need to fight with me. To be honest, those who can't perform a divine technique don't have the right to fight with him. Many people sighed. Even Huang Jiuchong and Huang Jiuchong sighed. The two of them were powerful, but they knew their own situation. They hadn't mastered a divine technique. At this moment, there were only a few people who could fight with Jiang Chen. Then, it seems like only the three of us can fight with you, Li Fengzi said softly. He took a step forward and said, the second prince of the Central Plains dynasty, Li Fengzi, a quasi-saint. Then, Li Prince also took a step forward. At the same time, the sound of chains breaking could be heard from his body. It was the sound of seals being unlocked. After a few breaths, Li Prince's cultivation had also reached secondary sage. The aura he emitted was no weaker than Li Fengzi's. Underworld Li dynasty's prince, Wu Feng, secondary sage, Li Prince said. Then, another person stepped forward. And this man was Jiang Chen's old acquaintance, Mu Xingyun, who could be called his old enemy. Burning Heaven Academy's disciple, Mu Xingyun, upper heavenly realm, Mu Xingyun said with a smile. There wasn't a trace of killing intent in his eyes and expression. The three of you aren't the only ones who can fight with him. At this moment, Shuge Taojin walked out. He cupped his hands at Jiang Chen and said, Heaven and Earth Pavilion's third disciple, Shuge Taojin, secondary sage. Please enlighten me. Mu Xingyun, you won't run away this time, right? Jiang Chen didn't look at the others. Instead, his gaze fell on Mu Xingyun. To Jiang Chen, Mu Xingyun was a thorn in his heart. If this person didn't die, Jiang Chen wouldn't be at ease. Hearing you say that, Mu Xingyun suddenly smiled and said, Goodbye. After saying that, Mu Xingyun's figure suddenly disappeared. He turned into shadows and fled in all directions. Jiang Chen was stunned. He didn't expect that Mu Xingyun would retreat without a fight. Don't let me catch you! Jiang Chen roared. He had nowhere to vent his anger. I've heard that Jiang Chen has always been invincible among his peers. He can't do anything to Mu Xingyun, someone said. An assassin with the Shadow Dao soul doesn't have any principles when doing things. He doesn't even care about his reputation. Once this kind of person grows up, the throne of the assassin world will probably change hands with him. This is the real king of assassins! Someone exclaimed. At this moment, Jiang Chen was extremely sullen. He glanced at the remaining three people and said, What do you want? Chapter 331. What do I want? Of course, I want your supreme sword intent, Li Fengzi said straightforwardly. A trace of killing intent flashed across the eyes of the Nine-Li Crown Prince, Wu Feng, when he heard this. He said, If it's possible, I want your life as well. After all, with your abilities, if we wait for you to grow, you will be like a mountain on our path to becoming a true god. Moreover, it will be an unsurmountable mountain. I don't want your life or your supreme sword intent. I only want you to return to the heaven and earth pavilion with me and become its disciple, Zhuge Taojin said. Jiang Qun ignored Zhuge Taojin and Li Fengzi's words and turned to look at Wu Feng, the Nine-Li Prince. If I'm angry, I can kill, Jiang Qun said. You want me to die, and I want to kill too. Do you dare to fight me? Killing anyone would kill. However, killing was not something one could talk about. Having killing intent in one's heart and saying it out loud were two different things. Just like now, Jiang Qun did not want to kill. However, since the Nine-Li Prince said it so straightforwardly, then, he would just kill him. According to the agreement, even if we kill you, the Billowing Academy cannot do anything to us. Wu Feng, the Nine-Li Prince said, People like you should not show off your abilities. If you know how to hide your abilities, this world is destined to be yours in the future. It's a pity, Wu Feng said softly. Jiang Qun suddenly smiled and looked down at his hands. He seemed to be muttering to himself. After entering the Earth realm, I can finally use some powerful martial techniques. How long has it been? It's been so long that I almost forgot, Jiang Qun said softly. What a satisfying battle. I hope that today will be as I wish. Buzz. As soon as he finished speaking, rays of godly light exploded from Jiang Qun's body. The power of heaven and earth surged out from his body like a ferocious beast and wrapped around his body like red gold chains. In the next instant, without waiting for Wu Feng to make a move, Jiang Qun took a step forward. He was like a giant golden beast, and when he reached out with his palm, it was like a giant hand that covered the sky. The sky instantly darkened under the force of the palm, and the force of the earth floated up and down like a mountain. Ground suppression! Following Jiang Qun's explosive roar, his palm pierced downwards like a cloud, heading straight for Wu Feng. Wu Feng's expression froze as he felt the power radiating from the palm. He couldn't help but take a step back. During this process, Wu Feng formed a seal with his hands, and a series of extremely cryptic runes appeared. There was also an obscure aura that seemed to have come from an ancient era, and it was accompanied by an aura that made one feel reverence. Underworld Continent's sorcery! It is said that most people in the Underworld Continent practice witchcraft, especially in the Nine-Li dynasty. Everyone's attainments in witchcraft are superb, Li Fengzi and the others exclaimed. They were also quite interested in this mysterious sorcery, but they were also quite fearful of it. That was because witchcraft was different from martial techniques. In comparison, witchcraft was much more powerful and mysterious. At this moment, as the runes on Wu Feng's body flashed, a sinister wind suddenly blew past. Following which, illusory giant beasts appeared out of thin air and charged towards Jiang Qun's palm. At the same time, many gray chains appeared out of thin air like octopuses. They locked Jiang Qun up in an instant. Witchcraft? Jiang Qun muttered softly. His body shook, and the power of heaven and earth exploded, directly shattering the chains on his body. At the same time, the force of the palm did not decrease, and it scattered all the illusions. In a short span of 3 breaths, the palm had already reached Wu Feng. Spirit Ferryman! Wu Feng shouted softly, and a drop of blood dripped from his forehead into the air. Following which, it turned into a rune and disappeared in a flash. The moment this rune disappeared, Jiang Qun's expression changed drastically. This was because he felt as if his soul was about to leave his body, and he could not control it. In an instant, Jiang Qun's strength dissipated, and he fell from the sky like a cripple. The palm print that seemed to cover the sky also disappeared at this moment. Today, I will ferryman your souls so that you will never be reincarnated. Wu Feng's voice was cold and filled with killing intent. Another drop of blood dripped from his forehead, and a few more runes appeared before disappearing. Vaguely, some people saw that these runes seemed to have turned into ferocious ghosts that lay on Jiang Chen's body and were devouring his soul. Real witchcraft is not like this. Jiang Chen shouted angrily. This is pure ghost witchcraft. Ah, regardless of whether it is witchcraft or ghost witchcraft, you are dead meat. Wu Feng said disdainfully. After being hit by the spirit ferryman, you are destined to die. I'll take your soul. Is that so? Jiang Chen raised his eyebrows, and a look of disdain flashed across his eyes. Then, a flame exploded in Jiang Chen's body, and the undying bird Dao soul rushed out from the depths of his soul. The undying bird was the most powerful divine bird in the world, and the flame on its body could burn everything that was dark. And what Wu Feng used was not witchcraft, but ghost witchcraft. Since it was ghost witchcraft, it meant that it was dark. And the flame of the undying bird Dao soul was enough to burn everything. Boom! At this moment, under the sky full of flames, the ghosts on Jiang Chen's body were all burned. Then, Jiang Chen's soul returned to its original position, and the power in his body returned. Previously, I was too weak and could only use the heavenly dance of brightness and darkness. Now, since I can use the power of the earth, then I will dance again. Jiang Chen said softly, and his body suddenly exploded with black and white colors. With the middle of his hair as the line, one side of his hair turned pitch black, and the other side turned white like the sun. Two sharp swords, one black and one white, appeared in his hands, and a green lotus floated above his head. There was also a huge cauldron rotating beneath his feet. Real dance of heaven and earth. In the next moment, Jiang Chen's figure rushed out, leaving behind black and white afterimages. The green lotus floated above his head, the huge cauldron rotating beneath his feet, and the sharp swords in his hands. He was like a flash of light. Before anyone could react, Jiang Chen's figure had already passed to Wu Feng. So fast. What kind of martial technique is this? So powerful. Another godly martial technique? Everyone exclaimed, and even Li Fengzi and the rest were shocked. Even they could not see Jiang Chen's attack clearly. And at this moment, someone exclaimed again. That was because Wu Feng's body was breaking apart inch by inch, and he was turning into a pile of meat paste. One sword, one song, one person, and one soul. Is this all Wu Feng is capable of? Someone frowned. The Ninely Prince, one of the best in his generation, was actually killed by Jiang Chen just like that. Wasn't this a little unreasonable? Cross. And just as everyone was confused, a voice that seemed to come from a soul sounded from the pile of meat paste. Immediately after, runes exploded from Wu Feng's meat paste. There was even a netherworld river and a boat that appeared out of nowhere. An obscure and powerful force enveloped the pile of meat paste. Jiang Chen tried to attack it a few times, but he was unable to move it at all. Just like that, under everyone's shocked gazes, the boat swayed in the netherworld river, carrying Wu Feng's meat paste, as if it had fallen into the cycle of reincarnation. After a few breaths, when the boat and the netherworld river disappeared, Wu Feng appeared in front of everyone unharmed. Ninely Dynasty's ultimate martial technique, reincarnation crossing. Zhuge Tao exclaimed. Legend has it that as long as one's breath is left, one can cross over to immortality. It can even bring a dead person back to life. Chapter 332. Under the reincarnation fairy, Wu Feng seemed to have been reborn. His essence, energy, and spirit reached their peak. Furthermore, the injuries and spiritual energy that he had lost previously had all recovered. At that moment, Wu Feng stood proudly in the air. His eyes were burning with anger, as if he wanted to skin Jiang Chen alive. You are the first person who can use the reincarnation fairy more than me, Wu Feng said coldly. Can the reincarnation fairy really bring a dead person back to life? Jiang Chen asked. He did not care about Wu Feng's emotions and thoughts. Instead, he looked curious. You dared to look down on me? Wu Feng was furious. Jiang Chen's answer was not directed at him. It was equivalent to looking down on him. As the prince of the Nine Li dynasty, Wu Feng had never been treated like this. However, Jiang Chen still looked curious. He blinked his eyes and stared at Wu Feng. He asked again, "I will use the Supreme Sword Essence in exchange for the reincarnation fairy of the Nine Li dynasty. How about that?" The moment these words came out, everyone present couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Fighting back and forth, they were doing it for the sake of the unparalleled sword intent. But now, Jiang Chen actually wanted to exchange the Supreme Sword Essence. However, everyone knew that the reincarnation fairy was the ultimate skill of the Nine Li dynasty. It was never taught to outsiders. Only the emperor and the prince could cultivate it. This was the foundation of the Nine Li dynasty. How could it be easily exchanged? "If I defeat you, I can still obtain the Supreme Sword Essence," Wu Feng shouted angrily. "You are just an ant. Die!" Boom! When he said that, a nine-headed python appeared behind Wu Feng. Its entire body was green and its fangs shone with a black radiance. There was even a gust of wind. "Nine-headed python Dao spirit? This thing has appeared again?" In an instant, cries of surprise rang out from all around. Li Fengzi and the others, in particular, looked at Wu Feng with fear in their eyes. To Li Fengzi, Zhuge Taojin, and the rest, although Wu Feng was strong, he was not a threat to them. But now, when Wu Feng displayed his Dao spirit, Li Fengzi and the rest felt a tinge of pressure and even fear. After the primordial age, the nine-headed snake Dao spirit has never appeared. I didn't expect it to land on Wu Feng's body in this generation. One snake has 9 lives, 9 heads, and 9 abilities. If it wasn't for the fact that this Dao soul hasn't appeared for a long time and the world has forgotten its might, this Dao soul would be able to be ranked in the top 20 of the Dao soul rankings. Or even higher. Jiang Chen was also astonished. He hadn't expected Wu Feng's Dao soul to be a 9-headed snake. But so what? To Jiang Chen, no matter how strong his Dao soul was, he could burn everything with a single blue lamp. Of course, it was impossible for Jiang Chen to use the myriad transformations heavenly lamp in front of so many people. "Today, I will kill you!" Wu Feng shouted loudly as he clenched his fists. His fists were like numerous gigantic snake heads as they pounced towards Jiang Chen. At the same time, the 9-headed snake Dao spirit charged over. Its enormous body was like a mountain, and its 9 heads spurted out a foul-smelling venom. The surrounding people had already dispersed as they didn't want to be touched by the venom. Even Li Fengzi and the rest had their spiritual energy flickering on their bodies to form a barrier to protect themselves. 9 heads. That's a lot. Jiang Chen muttered softly with a calm expression. Then, he waved his hand, and a purple-gold vine rose from his back. The vine rose to the sky and took root in the ground. The vines, which were flickering with divine light, shot out as Jiang Chen waved his hand. In an instant, the vines shot out like thousands of arms and sent the 9-headed snake Dao spirit flying. There were also over 100 vines that turned into chains and bound the 9-headed snake. Roar! However, as the 9-headed snake Dao spirit roared, streaks of black venom exploded from its body and corroded the vines on its body. At the same time, Wu Feng's palm print had already landed 3 inches in front of Jiang Chen. Feeling the terrifying power coming from the palm print, Jiang Chen moved sideways. The emperor's vines behind him intertwined to form a huge net and blocked the palm print. Before Jiang Chen could heave a sigh of relief, an obscure aura suddenly exploded from behind him. Like an invisible storm, it hit Jiang Chen's spiritual soul. Poof! At that moment, Jiang Chen's expression changed drastically. His spiritual soul was injured, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Moreover, his spiritual soul was also trembling. Sorcery is not as simple as you think. Wu Feng raised his eyebrows and licked his red lips. He said disdainfully, "Hand over the Supreme Sword Essence and submit to me. Then I can consider sparing your life." Ha! Jiang Chen laughed disdainfully. His spiritual soul flashed, and the power of his divine body exploded. It was like clusters of flames burning all over his body. In just 3 breaths' time, Jiang Chen's injuries were completely healed. Then, black and white light flashed on Jiang Chen's body. With 2 swords in his hands, he dashed out like a flash of light. This move again! He's too fast! The crowd exclaimed. They could not see Jiang Chen's figure clearly. They could only see a few black and white sword radiances landing on the 9-headed snake's spiritual soul. Roar! Roar! Following a few ear-piercing roars, the 9-headed snake's body was sliced into several pieces. A few of its heads were even chopped into pieces. However, this was a spiritual soul after all. It did not have a physical body. It was formed by a type of great Tao energy. After its body was sliced into pieces, it reassembled in an instant. At the same time, it spat out a mouthful of venom. Like a wave, it pressed down on Jiang Chen. At the same time, Wu Feng reacted. His left hand formed a handprint that resembled a full moon, and his right hand formed a seal that resembled a sailboat. Then, the 2 handprints merged, and a netherworld sea appeared. A sailboat appeared, and in the netherworld sea, a blood moon rose. Netherworld sea rising blood moon! Wu Feng roared. The blood moon shone brightly, and a terrifying spiritual energy engulfed Jiang Chen like a storm. For a moment, Jiang Chen's soul was shaken, and he was dazed for a moment. In just a short while, Wu Feng rushed in front of Jiang Chen. His fist was like a pitch-black millstone, and it ruthlessly smashed into Jiang Chen's head. Clang! However, this punch only caused Jiang Chen to tremble. The top of his head sounded like a huge bell being struck, but not a single crack appeared on it. This scene caused everyone's expression to change. Just how strong is his physical body? With this punch, even a quasi-sage would be beaten up, let alone a middle-level Earth Realm cultivator. I'll return it to you. At this moment, Jiang Chen regained his senses. Feeling the intense pain from his head, he couldn't help but roar. Then, Jiang Chen punched out. It was extremely fast, and like a flash of lightning, it landed on Wu Feng's body. This punch was like a mountain crashing down. The violent energy and the power of heaven and earth directly smashed Wu Feng's body. Even Wu Feng's spiritual energy was destroyed by this punch. However, Jiang Chen didn't relax. His gaze was alert, and his body was tense. A sharp look flashed across his eyes. This was because he knew that people with the 9-headed snake spirit were born with 9 lives. Furthermore, Jiang Chen didn't know if Wu Feng could still use the reincarnation crossing technique. If he could use the reincarnation crossing technique, Wu Feng would be immortal. Chapter 333. It's broken! One of its heads is broken! Suddenly, someone exclaimed. One of the heads of the 9-headed snake Tao spirit had been broken. A mysterious force appeared in the air and transformed into Wu Feng's appearance in 3 breaths' time. 9-headed snake Tao spirit, 9 lives! 1 head, 1 life. 1 head, 1 ability! As the crowd exclaimed, Jiang Chen's face darkened. He stared at the reborn Wu Feng and clenched his fists. You've killed me twice, you've really angered me! Wu Feng was enraged. If not for the reincarnation fairy and the 9-headed snake Tao spirit, he would have died in Jiang Chen's hands. Now, Wu Feng's eyes were red and he was on the verge of going berserk. He was about to explode with rage. Today, I'll kill you 10 times! Jiang Chen was fearless. He held Chasing Heaven in his hand and a sword radiance as bright as the moon shot out. Whoosh! However, after the sound of something breaking through the air, the sword radiance pierced through Wu Feng's body. It was as if the Wu Feng in front of them was an illusion. However, everyone could see that Wu Feng was not an illusion, but a living person with flesh and blood. 9-headed snake Tao spirit. Every time one of its heads is broken, it can allow its owner to be reborn. It can also bestow a special power to its owner. Shuge Taojin said in a low voice. After the head was broken, Wu Feng was reborn and obtained a special power. Yes. That's right. Void form. Wu Feng's face was full of arrogance. He curled his lips and said, I have to thank you, Jiang Chen. If not for you, I'm afraid I won't be able to obtain this power in my lifetime. Void form? Jiang Chen's eyes narrowed. He had some understanding of this power. Once he used void form, he would be able to turn himself into nothingness and avoid all attacks. However, Jiang Chen also knew that void form could not be used continuously. This was a special power, and there was a natural limit to it. Let's see how many times you can void form. At that moment, Jiang Chen's chasing heaven emitted a sword beam as the sun and moon appeared beside him. Like the radiance of the sun and moon, the sword radiance covered the sky as it slashed out, instantly engulfing Wu Feng. At the same time, the radiance of the sun and moon appeared in Jiang Chen's eyes. He had activated the yin-yang pupils, sun-moon eyes. The solar eclipse and lunar eclipse erupted simultaneously, trapping Wu Feng in place. Eye technique? This is yin-yang pupils, sun-moon eyes? Everyone's expressions changed. They were extremely fearful of this kind of eye technique that only existed in ancient books. According to legend, once the yin-yang eyes, sun-moon eyes, was cultivated to the Mahayana stage, one could even imprison the sun and moon. He could even see through the illusions of the great Tao and open the heavenly eye. It broke again. More than 10 breaths later, someone cried out in alarm, only to see that the 9-headed snake had lost another head. This meant that Wu Feng had been killed by Jiang Chen once again. Very good. You're really good. How dare you slash me 3 times? You are courting death. At this moment, the sky full of sword radiance disappeared, and Wu Feng appeared in front of everyone, completely unharmed. His aura was violent, and his eyes were bloodshot. The whites of his eyes could no longer be seen. He was completely enraged. Even when he spoke, every single word he spoke was filled with violent killing intent and rage. Today, I said I'll kill you 10 times, and I'll kill you 10 times. Jiang Chen raised his brows and slashed out with chasing the heavens again. However, this time, Wu Feng's punch was not fancy at all. He did not even use a single martial technique. However, it was such a simple punch that turned the sky full of sword radiance into dust. Furthermore, the momentum of this punch did not decrease, and its speed was extremely fast. Before Jiang Chen could react, it had already landed on Jiang Chen's body. Poof! A mouthful of blood spurted out from Jiang Chen's mouth, and a bloody hole appeared in his chest. Even his organs were spurting out from the bloody hole. At this moment, Jiang Chen was stunned. He lowered his head and looked at the bloody hole in his chest. His eyes were full of disbelief. With the strength of his physical body, even an immemorial sage constitution would have to bow down in front of him. Furthermore, he had a special sage constitution. His physical body was extremely strong, like a boulder. However, Wu Feng's punch had created a bloody hole in his body. Even the power of heaven and earth that protected his body had been shattered. Do you understand that strength can break all techniques? Wu Feng said disdainfully. Although I can't wait to cut you into 1,000 pieces, I still have to thank you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have obtained such power. Strength can break all techniques? Jiang Chen's expression was serious. He did not expect the 9-headed Hydra to give Wu Feng such an ability after cutting off his second head. Strength can break all techniques. This was the ultimate and most simple power. Jiang Chen used to be like this. Strength can break all techniques. Even if you had a peerless martial technique, it would all be destroyed with one punch. However, this power was only obtained by Jiang Chen after he became a true god. Now, Wu Feng was only a secondary sage, but he already had such power. This was simply unbelievable. The power given by the 9-headed Hydra cannot be used continuously. Zhiga Taojin reminded him. With his strength, he can only use it 3 times a day at most. Zhiga Taojin, just as you said, so what? I'll take his life with the next 2 punches. Wu Feng did not hide anything. After he finished speaking, he threw out 2 punches consecutively. These 2 punches were still ordinary. There was nothing fancy about them. However, the power contained within these two fists was so great that even the space around them was cracking. If Wu Feng was not only a secondary sage, the power of these two punches would be enough to shatter the void. I have no choice but to use my full strength. Jiang Chen smiled bitterly. Looking at the two streaks of fist radiance that were rushing towards him, his expression suddenly froze. Then Jiang Chen slammed his palms on the ground and shouted, 99 Lo Shengmen! Boom! Boom! In an instant, a terrifying power of the earth exploded from Jiang Chen's body. At the same time, the ground shook, and huge doors rose from the ground. 99 doors stacked layer by layer, blocking in front of Jiang Chen. 99? I've heard of the Lo Shengmen before. However, most of the time, there are 6 or 9 Lo Shengmen. 99 Lo Shengmen. The group of people was dumbfounded. They had seen people use Lo Shengmen, but they had never seen someone use 99 at once. How much spiritual energy was needed to use this? How much power of the earth was needed to use this? Most people would only be able to use a dozen or so Lo Shengmen after using all their spiritual energy, right? Boom! Boom! At this moment, the two streaks of fist radiance were like dragons. They circled around and smashed the Lo Shengmen one after another. However, when the two streaks of fist radiance smashed the 97 Lo Shengmen, the fist radiance had already dissipated. At this moment, Jiang Chen rushed out from behind the Lo Shengmen. He slashed out with his chasing sky sword, and a Kunping sword into the sky, as if it wanted to break through the sky. Before Wu Feng could react, an explosion sounded in the sky. A huge kun formed by the sword radiance swooped down and directly crushed Wu Feng. Chapter 334. If another head of the nine-headed snake was cut off, Wu Feng could be reborn again. Furthermore, he could obtain a special power. This was the power of the nine-headed snake Dao Soul. However, before Wu Feng could be reborn, Jiang Chen waved his hand and the undying bird rose from his back. Screech! With a long screech, the undying bird Dao Soul shot out like a flaming meteor and landed in front of the nine-headed snake. It's over! What the hell? It's a natural enemy! Everyone was dumbfounded and speechless. This was because everything in the world had karma, and everything had the Tao of mutual promotion and restraint. The Tao Soul was no exception. The nine-headed snake Tao Soul was powerful, but the undying bird Tao Soul was a natural enemy of it. The undying bird Tao Soul had the most young flames and could burn everything that was dark in the world. The power of the nine-headed snake belonged to the dark side. Furthermore, the undying bird fed on snakes and was a natural enemy of it. No! At this moment, Wu Feng seemed to have been reborn and regained his consciousness. However, when he saw the undying bird Tao Soul, he screamed in fear. If you don't show any killing intent towards me, I can let you go today. Jiang Chen said softly. You said that I don't know how to hide my abilities and show off my abilities. However, have you ever thought that my abilities are only the light of a candle compared to your killing intent? It's so weak that it can't be compared to yours. You are the one who is showing off your abilities, Jiang Chen said. Do you know the consequences of showing off your abilities? I am the prince of the Nine Li tribe. How dare you kill me? Wu Feng screamed hysterically, and his voice was filled with fear and a hint of threat. Jiang Chen ignored him. With a wave of his hand, the undying bird's flames exploded and engulfed the nine-headed snake. Then, the undying bird opened its flaming beak and swallowed the nine-headed snake in one gulp. Bam! The moment the nine-headed snake was swallowed, the ball of light that represented Wu Feng's rebirth collapsed. Then, the place fell silent. After several breaths of time, someone reacted and couldn't help but let out a long sigh. The Nine Li Prince died in the hands of the Wave Institute's Jiang Chen. Li Fengzi, do you want to try? At this moment, Jiang Chen turned around and looked at Li Fengzi. If my guess is correct, you are the strongest here. Not necessarily. Zhuge Taojin was not convinced. He raised his eyebrows and said, "He has never fought before. How can he be qualified to be the strongest?" "I don't think so either." All of a sudden, a cold voice rang out near Jiang Chen's ears. In an instant, Jiang Chen's hair stood on end, and his expression changed greatly. His figure moved to the side. However, his reaction was still a beat too slow. A pitch-black light, like an endless abyss, appeared out of nowhere and pierced through Jiang Chen's forehead. This attack could be said to be a sure kill. At the same time, the crowd also saw Mu Xingyun appear beside Jiang Chen. He had a sarcastic look on his face. Smiling, he said, "I'm not interested in the Supreme Sword Spirit. The only thing I'm interested in is your life. He is really strong. His concealment technique is so superb that we didn't notice it. Even Jiang Chen didn't notice it. This person is not only strong, but also patient," Li Fengzi and the others exclaimed. They were afraid of Mu Xingyun. At this moment, Jiang Chen was petrified. The space between his eyebrows had been pierced through, and the pitch-black light had pierced his holy soul directly. There was also a sealing force that wanted to seal Jiang Chen's divine soul and even his soul. "You have to understand that I am a dark master, an assassin. How can I fight with you openly?" Mu Xingyun said. "Sneak attacks are shameful. But for an assassin, to be able to kill a person is a symbol of glory and strength." Jiang Chen stood in place and did not speak. He operated the power of his whole body and was refining the sealing force on his divine soul. At the same time, Jiang Chen also agreed with Mu Xingyun's words. Mu Xingyun was a dark master. How could he fight with him openly? Now that Mu Xingyun's sneak attack was successful, Jiang Chen could only sigh at his carelessness. "I always thought that you had really retreated, so I said that Li Fengzi was the strongest here." After a few breaths, the sealing force on Jiang Chen's divine soul was refined. Only then did he open his mouth and said with a solemn expression, "I, Jiang Chen, admit that you are very strong. I don't need anyone to admit me." Mu Xingyun chuckled and said, "Just now, I had plenty of opportunities to continue attacking you, but I didn't. It's because I want to let these top geniuses know one thing. Among the people of the same generation on the godless continent, you are not the strongest." Mu Xingyun raised his eyebrows and said, "As long as I am still alive, you will have enemies. You weren't confident that you could kill me just now." Jiang Chen curled his lips and said, "If you were confident, why didn't you make a move?" "Heh!" Mu Xingyun sneered and did not speak. He agreed with Jiang Chen's words. It was because he knew that Jiang Chen was very strong. Even if Jiang Chen's glabella was pierced and his divine soul was sealed, Mu Xingyun did not dare to be careless. "This time, I really have to leave," Mu Xingyun whispered. He looked at Jiang Chen and said, "The matter between you and me will not end here. One day, your life will fall into my hands." After saying that, Mu Xingyun no longer paid attention to the injured Jiang Chen. His figure disappeared. This time, Jiang Chen was very vigilant. He observed for a long time. After confirming that Mu Xingyun had really left, he sat down cross-legged and planned to heal his injuries. "I'm injured, so I won't fight today," Jiang Chen said. "I don't want to bully an injured person. I'll wait until your injuries are healed, then I'll fight you again," Li Fengzi said. Zhuge Tao also nodded. Everyone had their own pride. With his and Li Fengzi's strength, and in front of so many people, it was naturally impossible to force Jiang Chen to fight again. At this moment, Jiang Chen was sitting cross-legged in front of so many people, healing his injuries and regulating his breathing. At the same time, he was also puzzled as to why Mu Xingyun had suddenly left. In Jiang Chen's heart, Mu Xingyun had absolute strength and could compete with him. However, looking at Mu Xingyun's appearance before, he seemed to have left in a hurry. "People from the Burning Heaven Academy. Why are they here?" After more than 10 breaths, just as Jiang Chen was puzzled, a group of elders from the Burning Heaven Academy, and even the vice principal and principal arrived one after another. The group of people's faces were very ugly. After arriving here, their gazes swept around as if they were looking for something. Have you seen my Burning Heaven Academy's disciple, Mu Xingyun? After a few breaths, an elder from the Burning Heaven Academy asked. His voice was cold and filled with anger. He's gone, someone replied. Damn it! Chase after him. No matter if he's dead or alive, bring him back to the Burning Heaven Academy. The principal of the Burning Heaven Academy was furious. He ignored his status and roared in front of these juniors. Chapter 335. Mu Xingyun suddenly left, but the people from the Burning Heaven Academy arrived. If nothing happened in between, no one would believe it. Looking at the appearance of the Burning Heaven Academy's dean again, everyone was clear in their hearts that Mu Xingyun must have caused big trouble in the Burning Heaven Academy. The people from the Burning Heaven Academy did not stay here for long. After asking some questions, they directly left. Jiang Chun was extremely puzzled. Just what did Mu Xingyun do in the Burning Heaven Academy to actually make a group of the Burning Heaven Academy's upper echelons personally take action? The dean was even furious on the spot. Something big happened. The Burning Heaven Academy's Burning Heaven Heart Sutra was stolen by someone. Half a day later, when Jiang Chun was still recuperating, a piece of news spread into the Below Academy and quickly swept through the entire barren state. All because the Burning Heaven Heart Sutra was the Burning Heaven Academy's supreme cultivation method, the legacy of the former Burning Heaven Emperor. Since the Burning Heaven Academy was established until now, being able to keep a foothold in the godless continent without collapsing, the most crucial thing was this Burning Heaven Heart Sutra. Now, the Burning Heaven Heart Sutra was stolen, and the Burning Heaven Academy was not around at all. This had a huge impact on the future. Mu Xingyun stole the Burning Heaven Heart Sutra? Jiang Chun said softly, and also felt relieved in his heart. If not for this, why would the Burning Heaven Academy need to go to war to come and find Mu Xingyun? But what Jiang Chun could not figure out was that with Mu Xingyun's talent and aptitude, as long as he stayed in the Burning Heaven Academy to cultivate properly, the Burning Heaven Academy would definitely nurture him well. At that time, receiving the true inheritance, and even obtaining the Burning Heaven Heart Sutra, was also nothing difficult. Then, since that was the case, why did Mu Xingyun want to steal the Burning Heaven Heart Sutra? Could it be that there was still some secret involved? Pass down the order, secretly find Mu Xingyun, and bring him back to the Central State Dynasty at all costs. Li Fengzi secretly transmitted his voice, a trace of light flashing across his eyes. At the same time, the various geniuses also transmitted back, reporting this matter to the ears of the upper echelons of their respective sects and forces. For a moment, not only the barren state, the people of the other 6 states were all moved. Facing the Heaven Burning Heart Sutra, no one could remain calm. Everyone would be moved. In the past, the Burning Heaven Heart Sutra was in the hands of the Burning Heaven Academy. It was naturally not good for the various major sects and forces to snatch it. But now, the Burning Heaven Heart Sutra had been brought out of the Burning Heaven Academy. If the various sects and forces could find Mu Xingyun before the Burning Heaven Academy, and secretly obtain the Burning Heaven Heart Sutra from Mu Xingyun, then what could the Burning Heaven Academy do? The inheritance of the Burning Heaven Emperor is of great importance. Zhuge Tao let out a long sigh. Then, he looked deeply at Jiang Chun and said, I'm going back to the Heaven and Earth Pavilion. If there's a chance in the future, I'll fight with you again. Clearly, the upper echelons of the Heaven and Earth Pavilion had also made a move and summoned all the disciples. It was most likely because of Mu Xingyun and the Heaven Burning Heart Sutra. Moreover, after Zhuge Tao left, the other geniuses also left one after another. Only Li Fengzi and his group remained. You 2 brothers aren't leaving? After half an incense stick's worth of time, Jiang Chun stood up, his injuries completely healed. There was a trace of a smile on his face. When the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, he gave off an unruly feeling. If I don't fight with you, why should I leave? Li Fengzi said. It seems that the Central State Dynasty is determined to obtain the supreme sword intent in my hands? Jiang Chun raised his eyebrows, then smiled and said, Actually, if you want the supreme sword intent, as long as you tell me properly, I can give it to you. The reason why I don't want to give it to you is because your attitude is wrong. When these words came out, Li Fingzi and Li Fengyuan were stunned for a moment. They were a little confused. The various sects and forces had spent a lot of effort to make an agreement with the Billow Academy. After many twists and turns, they came here to fight with Jiangchen, wanting to obtain the supreme sword intent. And Jiangchen had always been resisting, unwilling to hand over the supreme sword intent. But now, they were a little dumbfounded. He was unwilling to hand over the supreme sword intent just because their attitude was wrong? Then, if their attitude was better, would Jiangchen really give the supreme sword intent to them? Do you think we are fools? Li Fengyuan shouted angrily. If you were willing to hand it over, we wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. Have you ever been nice to me since the beginning? Jiangchen said sarcastically. In my eyes, all inheritances are just SOSO. They're dispensable. As long as you talk nicely, how can I not give you the supreme sword intent? After saying that, Jiangchen narrowed his eyes slightly, looked at Li Fingzi, and said mockingly, What do you say? Let's fight first. Li Fingzi raised his head. You are very strong. In the previous battle, I was weaker than you in the same realm, but today, I will use all my strength. And then? Jiangchen asked. If you lose, I won't give you the supreme sword intent. From what you said just now, I knew that you would give me the supreme sword intent. Li Fingzi suddenly smiled. No one is a fool, I know what you meant. You understood, but there is someone who didn't. Isn't the one beside you a fool? Jiangchen said with a smile. Li Fengyuan's face turned ugly when he heard that. However, he really didn't understand what Jiangchen had meant by what he had said. Let's go somewhere else to fight, Li Fingzi said, then soared into the sky and flew towards the back mountain of the Wave Institute. Only the elders and the dean lived in the back mountain of the Wave Institute. Usually, no one was allowed to enter this place. However, as far as Jiangchen was concerned, he could go anywhere in the Billowing Wave Institute. As for Li Fingzi, as the second prince of the Central Plains dynasty, if he wanted to go to the back mountain, the Wave Institute wouldn't stop him. After all, they still had to give face to the Central Plains dynasty. After a few breaths, when the two of them entered the back mountain, their auras had reached the peak. Li Fingzi stood proudly in the sky. His quasi-sage aura was like a rainbow, soaring into the sky. The layers of clouds began to crumble under this aura, and a strange phenomenon appeared. It was as if a golden lotus was rotating in the air. Jiangchen's blood qi was overflowing, and when he opened his eyes, it seemed like the sun and moon were floating. Behind him, the Emperor's vine and the undying bird Tao Soul appeared together. The purple gold and crimson radiance illuminated the area around him. The undying bird landed on the Emperor's vine, like a phoenix perching on a parasol tree. A series of loud cries shook the heavens and echoed across the clouds. Do you think it's fair for me to fight with you as a quasi-sage? Li Fingzi suddenly asked. Fair? Is there anything fair in this world? Jiangchen asked back. No. Li Fingzi shook his head. Some people are born to be kings, some become bandits, some live mediocre lives, and some have glory from birth. There's no such thing as fairness in this world. And in the world of cultivators, the word fairness is a joke. The only fairness is strength. Jiangchen raised his eyebrows. With enough strength, fairness is nothing. Yes. Li Fingzi nodded. Boom! Boom! The moment he finished speaking, the two of them looked at each other and charged out at almost the same time. Chapter 336. One of them held the dragon scale armor, and the dragon scale reverse sword. His dragon aura was vast and mighty, and the dragon's aura turned into an invisible spiritual storm that rushed toward Jiangchen. Jiangchen's body was surrounded by sword intent, and there was a flash of light between his eyebrows. That was his violent spiritual power. Boom! In the next moment, the two of them collided. With a loud explosion, Jiangchen slashed out with the chasing the heavens power in his hand, and the dragon scale armor vibrated with the sound of a bell being rung. At the same time, Li Fengzi slashed with the dragon scale reverse sword in his hand, and it could be said that it landed squarely on Jiang Chen's body. However, Jiang Chen's physical body was extremely strong, and the power of heaven and earth had turned into a battle suit. With the strength of his physical body, he took the sword head-on and was unharmed. "This physical body!" Li Fengzi exclaimed, but his hands did not stop moving. He placed the dragon scale armor in front of him, and the dragon scale reverse sword in his hand shot out like a spear, forcing Jiangchen to retreat more than 10 feet. Without waiting for Jiangchen to get close, Li Fengzi formed a seal with both hands. A rune that looked like a mountain flashed, and a majestic force of mountains and rivers erupted. Han seal! Accompanied by a roar, the rune flashed with boundless light, and it was like a mountain falling from the sky. "What the F***ck? You even know the Han seal!" Jiangchen cursed. He pointed chasing the heavens at the sky, and all the strength in his body gathered at the tip of the sword. "Of the 9 seals in the world, my Zhongzhou dynasty has 3. Li Fengzi raised his eyebrows. "No matter how strong your physical body is, it will be suppressed by the Han seal. Sword cleaves the firmament." Jiangchen ignored Li Fengzi. He looked serious. After rotating his body, he chased after the sky and attacked it. Boom! In an instant, a boundless sword light erupted. It was like a true dragon had charged out from the sky chaser and collided with the descending mountain seal. Amidst a series of explosions, the sword rays intertwined like a large net, but it was incomparably sharp. In a few breaths, it actually cut the Han seal into nothingness. "What?" Li Feng's expression changed. The rippling mountain seal was one of the 9 seals under the heavens. It gathered the power of mountains and rivers, and could suppress everything. Moreover, it was so heavy that ordinary attacks would not be able to break through it. "You have the Han seal, and I have the supreme sword intent," Jiangchen said in a serious tone. The previous sword attack had originated from the supreme sword intent. The supreme sword intent had no moves or styles. It all depended on one's own comprehension. Whatever he could comprehend from it, that was what it was. "Sky-flipping seal!" Without waiting for Jiangchen to rush over, Li Fengzi's hands formed seals once more. In an instant, the power of heaven and earth erupted, and a palm flipped down from the sky. "Can't we talk nicely?" Jiangchen was stunned for a moment, and he felt guilty. The 9 seals under the heavens, each seal was extremely powerful. Among them, the overturning sky seal was the most powerful. According to legend, as long as one's strength was enough, even the sky could be overturned under the sky-flipping seal. "I've always been good when I speak." Li Fengzi was stunned for a moment. He did not expect Jiangchen to be able to show such a cute side in such an intense battle. Therefore, Li Fengzi's heart suddenly relaxed. However, in the next moment, Li Fengzi also cursed and shouted, "F***ck." This was because Jiangchen had summoned 18 clones in succession, and each of them held chasing heaven in their hands. Following that, 36 sword rays rushed up and slashed the sky-flipping seal into nothingness. Sword incarnation? Where did you get such a lost martial technique? Li Fengzi's eyes narrowed. "I picked it up." Jiangchen chuckled. His figure moved horizontally, and he used shrinking earth to an inch. With one step, it was as if he had crossed time and space. In an instant, he appeared in front of Li Fengzi. Boom! In the next moment, Jiangchen threw out 3 punches in succession. One punch shook off the dragon scale reverse sword. One punch shook off the dragon scale shield. The last punch landed directly in front of Li Fengzi. Poof! With a muffled sound, Li Fengzi's entire face was crooked. He spat out blood and a few bloody teeth. The bridge of his nose was also tempered. It could be said that his entire face had collapsed. However, Li Fengzi was not seriously injured. He was a quasi-sage. Although he had yet to become a sage, His sage body was not weaker than Jiang Chen's. There's no one here, Li Fingzi said to himself. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Then he cursed. Are you King looking for death? You want to slap my face? Second prince, please pay attention to your status, image, and demeanor. Jiang Chen mocked. At the same time, he rubbed his palm. He secretly thought that Li Fingzi's skin was really thick. Even his palm was slightly painful from the slap. If it weren't for the imperial family's reputation, would I be like this? Li Fingzi looked like a ruffian and said, If the eldest prince doesn't come out, everything outside will be managed by me. Of course, I have to be good on the surface. However, there are no outsiders here now. Why should I pretend? Li Fingzi spat a mouthful of saliva. His body emitted a golden light, and the shadow of a real dragon appeared behind him. In an instant, the shadow of the real dragon solidified and then split. Finally, it landed on Li Fingzi's body and turned into a battle armor. 3 Dao spirits? Jiang Chen widened his eyes in surprise. After his rebirth, Jiang Chen thought that he was already the best with 3 Dao spirits. However, it seemed that there was always someone better in this world. Li Fingzi, who had the twin Dao spirits, the dragon scale reverse sword and the dragon scale armor, had summoned another Dao spirit. And this Dao spirit was still a dragon Dao spirit. Dragon shield, dragon sword, and dragon armor. I have all 3. Li Fingzi no longer spoke with a demeanor. He was more like a scoundrel in the marketplace. It's a pity that the position of the emperor of the Zhongzhou dynasty will not be yours in the future. Jiang Chen mocked. Hearing this, Li Fingzi's face darkened. This was because the position of the emperor of the Zhongzhou dynasty had always belonged to the first prince, since ancient times. As the second prince, no matter how outstanding he was destined to have no fate with the position of the emperor in the future. This was also the pain in his heart. I'll kill you! Li Fingzi was furious. Wearing the dragon armor, holding the dragon sword and dragon shield, he charged toward Jiang Chen. It's been a long time since I had a good fight. Today, I'll accompany you. Jiang Chen did not use any other means. The two of them were like martial artists. After they collided, they fought with their physical bodies. After half a day, Jiang Chen was sweating profusely. Even with the existence of the heavenly star, the power of heaven and earth would not be exhausted. However, the power of heaven and earth in his body could not be connected. On the other side, Li Fingzi used the dragon sword as a crutch and stood in the air. He was shouting and his legs were trembling. He did not have the heavenly star, and had relied on his own realm to hold on until now. Until now, Jiang Chen had not lost, and he, Li Fingzi, had not lost either. However, Li Fingzi's strength had been consumed by more than half and was almost exhausted. Are you a human or a ghost? As a second sage, I'm tired from fighting. How can you still move? Li Fingzi squinted. Did you eat pills? I'm poor. I can't afford pills. Jiang Chen mocked. Do you still want to fight? Although I can't win against you, you can't win against me either. The last blow. Li Fingzi's expression suddenly froze. He did not want to lose to Jiang Chen, and he did not want to end in a draw. After all, he was a second sage and Jiang Chen was only at the Middle-earth realm. His realm was so much higher than Jiang Chen's. If he still could not defeat Jiang Chen, Li Fingzi felt that he had lost all face. Chapter 337. Li Fingzi put away his ruffian look. His eyebrows were raised, and stars seemed to be floating in his eyes. He formed hand seals and chanted an ancient scripture. It was as if he was chanting an incantation. Buzz! After a few breaths, the dragon sword, dragon armor, and dragon shield floated in front of him and quickly disintegrated. After another 3 breaths, a dazzling light exploded in front of him, and the 3 Dao souls merged together. Upon closer inspection, it was a golden sky halberd. It was golden in color, and had dragon patterns on its surface. At the bottom of the sky halberd, there was a lifelike dragon's head. A terrifying dragon's aura spread out from the sky halberd, and one could vaguely hear a dragon's roar. Li Fingzi did not move. He stood in place, and divine light rose from his body. His eyes were deep as he stared at the sky halberd in front of him. He suddenly shouted, "Condense!" The moment his voice fell, an illusory figure was formed. Its appearance could not be seen clearly, but the golden divine light spread out. The illusory figure was like a real thing. It stretched out one hand and held the sky halberd in its hand. Then, a shield with a dragon's head carved on it suddenly appeared and fell into the illusory figure's other hand. Soul into soul, body into body. This move is called soul snatching single. Li Fingzi spoke in a low voice. He waved his hand, and the shadow, holding the sky piercer, dashed toward Jiangchen with the power of wind and thunder. Surrounded by the mighty breath of the dragon, it dashed toward Jiangchen. Jiangchen narrowed his eyes. He knew that this move was Li Fingzi's strongest move, and he did not dare to be careless. Therefore, when Li Fingzi used soul-snatching single, Jiangchen had already made his move. The heavenly star in his body was burning, and the mighty power of heaven and earth gushed out like a tide and swept across his body. The brilliance of the sun and moon floated in his eyes, the undying bird above his head, and the emperor's vine behind him towered into the sky. In his hand, chasing heaven was clenched, and the sword radiance was swallowing. Desolation! The next moment, Jiangchen let out a long roar, and his hair fluttered. Upon closer inspection, each strand of hair was like a sharp sword. Moreover, an extremely terrifying sword intent erupted from his body. Is this the inheritance of the desolate god, the supreme sword will? Li Fingzi exclaimed. That's right. Jiangchen whispered as he slashed out with chasing heaven. Boom! In an instant, a sword light that seemed to pierce through the sky exploded, illuminating the entire back mountain. More than a dozen nearby mountains were reduced to dust by this sword light. The mountains and rivers disintegrated one after another like paper. After the origami, someone else has mastered Baron. At a certain place in the back mountains, the blue sky Confucian scholar raised his head to look at the nearby sword light, a hint of joy and excitement in his eyes. Behind him, Qin Kong Ai's expression was ugly. The other elders were also wiping the cold sweat off their foreheads. This was all because Jiangchen's sword could be said to have destroyed half of the back mountain. Ancestor, aren't you going to stop it? Qin Kong first smiled bitterly. If this sword really slashes down, I'm afraid Li Fingzi will die. If Li Fingzi dies, this back mountain will also be destroyed. Another elder had a strange expression. This back mountain is the foundation of the Billowing Waves Academy. If it's destroyed, then so be it. The blue sky Confucian scholar curled his lips as he thought to himself. If he's going to die, what's the point of having this Billowing Waves Academy? Boom! At this moment, the sword light finally fell, slashing the shadow into nothingness. The dragon sword, dragon armor, and dragon shield were also jolted back into Li Fingzi's body. In an instant, Li Fingzi's face turned pale as his pupils contracted. Looking at the sword light that was rapidly slashing down, he finally felt the taste of death. However, he smiled. Because he knew that Jiangchen was not that kind of person. In this battle, Jiangchen would not kill him. Moreover, he, Li Fingzi, would not lose this battle. I said it's a draw, but you didn't believe me. Seeing that the sword light was about to slash Li Fingzi's body, Jiangchen muttered weakly. Then, his entire body fell from the sky. The power of heaven and earth in his body, under the condition that he had the heavenly star, had actually dried up. As for the sword light, without the support of Jiangchen's power of heaven and earth, it also dissipated. In the end, it did not slash Li Fingzi's body. You can't slash this sword, so I won't die. Li Fingzi stood in place with a smile, but that smile was a little sad. Yes, he, Li Fingzi, had not lost. However, he had not won. A quasi-saint was unable to defeat a cultivator in the middle of the earth realm. Although he had not lost, he had still lost. Say it, what do you want? After a few breaths, Li Fengzi's expression returned to normal. He looked as steady and calm as before, with the demeanor of a king. He stared at Jiang Qin, who was lying on the ground, and said, "Just say what you want, as long as I can give it. I only want a promise from you." Jiang Qin was lying on the ground. The power in his body was slowly recovering, but he did not even want to move a finger. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Li Fengzi, who was standing in the air, and said, "In the future, if I am in a life and death situation and no one can save me, the Central Continent dynasty must stand up." "That's all?" Li Fengzi was stunned, as if he was surprised. This was because in Li Fengzi's heart, as long as the Central Continent dynasty acted, there were not many things in the world that could not be settled. And such a promise was too simple for Li Fengzi. "You think it's very simple? Do you know who my enemy is?" Jiang Qin said mockingly. "How about it? Do you agree?" "Yes." Li Fengzi nodded. Then, he threw a token with 7 dragons engraved on it in front of Jiang Qin, and said, "If such a day really comes, crush it. The Central Continent dynasty will definitely stand up and support you." "That's enough." Jiang Qin smiled and accepted the 7 dragons token. Then, he formed a seal with both hands, condensing the supreme sword intent into a rune, and sent it in front of Li Fengzi. "Be careful, don't try to comprehend it casually. If you are not careful, you will die," Jiang Qin reminded him. "I know," Li Fengzi said softly. Then, he turned around and walked away. However, after a few steps, he stopped again. After a moment of silence, he said seriously, "People will continue to become stronger. There will be a day when I will not be below you. I also believe that." Jiang Qin nodded and said, "If we meet again in the future, I can give you some pointers." Li Fengzi was stunned for a moment. He cursed in his heart. "Little brat, do I need your pointers?" Thinking about it, Li Fengzi did not say anything else. With the supreme sword intent, he brought Li Fengyuan and left the Billowing Wave Academy. "Ancestor! Ancestor! What happened to you?" Not long after Li Fengzi and the others left the Billowing Wave Academy, and before Jiang Qin could even get up from the ground, somewhere in the back mountain, the expressions of Qin Kongyi and the others changed greatly. There were even a few exclamations in succession. At the same time, the Billowing Wave Academy appeared. It lifted Jiang Qin and brought him in front of Qin Kongyi, and said in a deep voice, "Take one last look at him." Chapter 338. In front of a thatched hut at the back of the mountain, the upper echelons of the Billowing Waves Institute were gathered with solemn expressions. Some of them had sorrow in their eyes, while others were calm, but there was a trace of excitement in the depths of their eyes. Outside the thatched hut, more than 30 people were kneeling side by side. They were all wearing the same robes, and they were all descendants of the Qin Kong clan. Inside the thatched hut, Qin Kong Confucian scholar was lying on a shabby wooden bed. His face was devoid of blood, and his life aura was extremely weak. Qin Kong Yishur stood at the side, tears rolling in his old eyes. On the other side, Qin Kong Xianwei was kneeling in front of the window, tears in her eyes, and her expression sorrowful. At this moment, Jiang Qin and Bo Lan arrived. The two of them, one in front and one behind, stood by the wooden bed in silence. Outside the desolate god's training ground, although the old ancestor returned safely, his injuries are not light. Qin Kong Yishur sighed. Coupled with the previous hidden injuries, the old ancestor will not be able to survive. If not for you, how could the old ancestor fall like this? Qin Kong Xianwei suddenly looked at Jiang Qin, glaring at him, and shouted angrily, "What use are you? I don't understand why the old ancestor is so good to you. He did not hesitate to use his life to fight for a future for you. What's so good about me?" Jiang Qin heard this and whispered, as if he was asking himself. He thought of himself when he was in the 9 firmaments divine world. At that time, he had many followers by his side. However, when he became a divine king, how many of those people who had fought alongside him were left in the end? And after he fell, How many of those who were still in the nine firmament's divine world had survived? It seems like I'm really useless. The people around me are leaving one after another, and I can't do anything about it. After a long time, Jiangchen sighed. What should I do, live? At this moment, the unconscious Qing Kong Confucian scholar suddenly opened his eyes. His voice was weak, and his eyes were muddy. However, he stared at Jiangchen and forced a smile, saying, I put everything on you, this is my choice. And the choice I, Qing Kong Confucian scholar, make is definitely not wrong. It's a pity that before you can succeed, I will die first. I won't be able to wait for you. The blue sky Confucian scholar narrowed his eyes and his chest heaved. He knew his situation. If he closed his eyes, he would never be able to open them again. He was unwilling to accept this. If he had met Jiangchen earlier, he wouldn't have ended up like this. In the blue sky Confucian scholar's heart, perhaps this was his fate. You can still be saved, Jiangchen said softly, but he didn't dare to be sure. He only said, I'll take you away from here. His lifespan has dried up, and he has secretly injured his family. He has even injured his 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls. How are you going to save him? Bolan said in a low voice. I know you are extraordinary and have many secrets. However, even if a god were to descend to the mortal world, it would still be difficult to save his life. I want a piece of eternal azure gold. Jiang Chen's expression suddenly turned serious, and he said, Everyone, retreat. What do you mean? The ancestor is about to die. Don't joke around. Around them, the people of the Blue Sky clan shouted angrily, clearly not believing Jiang Chen's words. After all, in their eyes, Jiang Chen was just a brat. His cultivation was low, and he was young. How many people would believe what he said? Everyone, retreat. Suddenly, the blue sky Confucian scholar seemed to have a final burst of strength as he struggled to sit up on the bed. The turbidity in his eyes dissipated, and a bright light appeared. As if he used his last bit of strength, he shouted, This old man doesn't want to die. Dean, what do you think? Jiangchen looked at Bolan and said, It can't be that the huge Bolan Academy doesn't even have a piece of eternal azure gold, right? Yes, I'll go get it for you now. Bolan nodded, then waved his hand and said, Everyone, leave. As his voice fell, Blue Sky 1 and the others hesitated for a while before walking out of the bamboo house in the end. At this moment, only Jiangchen and the Blue Sky Confucian scholar were left in the bamboo house. Outside of the desolate god Dao Right, everyone knows that I have obtained the supreme sword intent and want to kill me to seize the inheritance. Jiangchen said, I know that if it weren't for you at that time, I would definitely have died. Hearing this, the Blue Sky Confucian scholar didn't say anything, but fell straight back on the bed. He didn't even have the strength to speak. Do you believe in this day? Do you believe in this life? Jiangchen continued, not caring if the Blue Sky Confucian scholar could hear or understand. You know my identity. I am Tianqin. Jiangchen said softly, There is something that I wanted to leave for myself, but I, Jiangchen, am not an ungrateful person. Today, I cut off my own path to continue your future. In the future, if you reach the top, you must forget. After saying this, Jiangchen pressed his palm on the top of his head. It was as if an invisible hand had reached into his soul. Then, with a flash of light, a mark hidden in the depths of his soul was taken out by him. During this process, Jiangchen also thought that if he lost this mark, his future path was equivalent to a dead end. However, if he didn't do this, the Blue Sky Confucian scholar would undoubtedly die. The heart of the ninth firmament, the throne of the Divine King, I use the Divine King's Godhead to continue your life. From today onwards, there is no Tianqin in this world, only you, the Confucian scholar. In the next moment, Jiangchen's face was deathly pale. The mark that was taken out from the depths of his soul was his Godhead. Divine King's Godhead. This was Jiangchen's final trump card, and also his strongest trump card after returning to the ninth firmament divine world in the future. With this Divine King's Godhead, if Jiangchen ascended to the divine world, he could immediately become a god and recover to his strongest state. And now, Jiangchen had given away this most important thing. However, once a divine king's godhead changed owners, it would dissipate. Giving the godhead to the blue sky Confucian scholar didn't mean that he could become a divine king. Instead, he used the power within the godhead to temporarily extend the blue sky Confucian scholar's life. A divine king's godhead defied the heavens and changed fate, but only to extend the blue sky Confucian scholar's life for 3 months. 3 months to break the godhead and cut off Jiangchen's future path. But Jiangchen had no regrets. "I'll give it to you." At this moment, Jiangchen shouted. The divine king's godhead in his hand shattered, turning into wisps of divine light that sank into the blue sky Confucian scholar's body. Several breaths later, the divine king's godhead completely disappeared, but the blue sky Confucian scholar didn't wake up. However, his life force recovered a little, allowing him to live for another 3 months. And in these 3 months, if he couldn't find a way to extend the blue sky Confucian scholar's life, it would be equivalent to giving the godhead for nothing, and the blue sky Confucian scholar would still die. Why did the sky change? Look! The sky is full of brilliant suns. The sky is full of stars. At the same time, outside the bamboo house, everyone saw a shocking scene. In the clear sky, brilliant suns suddenly appeared one after another, and even stars appeared together with them. No one knew that this was because after the divine king's godhead shattered, the gods of the 9 firmaments divine world sensed it. Then, from now on, the 9 firmaments divine world would erupt into a storm, and all the gods would have hope of becoming the divine king. And those balls of light that seemed like brilliant suns and stars were the power of those gods. They were going to make them move. They were going to start the expedition. They were going to stir up the entire 9 firmaments, just to become the divine king. Gods of the 9 firmaments, if I don't bestow this divine king's godhead to others, you will always be at my feet. Jiangchen said softly. Suddenly he smiled faintly and said, Fine, I'll give you all a chance. Even if someone becomes the divine king, there will come a day when I return. That divine king's position will definitely be taken back by me personally. Tianchen, what's wrong with you? The divine king's godhead, shattered? What exactly happened to you on the godless continent? Can we still wait for you to come back? In the 9 firmaments divine world, those gods who had once followed Jiangchen also noticed this matter. They were worried about Jiangchen, and there were even some who looked sorrowful, mistakenly thinking that Jiangchen was completely dead. Chapter 339. The divine king godhead had always been on Jiangchen, never disappearing. It was just that before becoming a god, Jiangchen was unable to utilize the power of the godhead. Hence, it had always been hidden in the deepest part of his soul. Now, Jiangchen bestowed the godhead, cutting off his own path, but continuing the Azure Sky Scholar's path. No one knew how much trouble and difficulties Jiangchen would bring him by doing this. But Jiangchen would not say. He only knew that one must have a clear conscience as a person. Moreover, so what if he did not have the divine king godhead? In his previous life, Jiangchen still fought all the way without the godhead, and finally sat on the seat of the divine king. This time, starting all over again, Jiangchen believed that he could still sit on the seat of the divine king. And now, it was merely a short farewell to divine king Tianchen. Is the eternal azure gold you wanted enough? Before long, Bolan entered the bamboo house. Sensing the wisps of vitality coming from the Azure Sky Scholar's body, a trace of shock involuntarily flashed across his eyes. Previously, everyone could feel that the Azure Sky Scholar was dead for sure, his lifespan exhausted. But now, he actually... Enough. Jiangchen spoke softly, wiping the blood from the corners of his mouth, then looked at the eternal azure gold that was taller than a person, and said with a smile, I'm leaving, bringing Grand Ancestor, and leaving this place together. The moment these words came out, Bolan's expression involuntarily changed, even more worried and puzzled, saying, Go where? Leaving the Billow Academy and going outside, how many people want your life, do you know? If I don't leave, the Billow Academy will have no days of peace. Jiangchen sighed. The matter between me and the Martial Pavilion, will the Martial Pavilion be willing to drop it? Now I also obtained the Rage God's inheritance, which major force in this world will be willing to let me off? Could it be that just based on the agreement you guys made with the various major forces, you can make them compromise? Is it possible? Jiangchen pursed his lips and said. Bolan could not help letting out a long sigh when he heard that. He was very clearly aware that even though the Surge Academy was the number 2 academy in the world, it was ultimately unable to resist those top sects, clans, and even inherited powers on the godless continent. If Jiangchen stayed, the Billowing Wave Academy would definitely do their best to protect him. However, Bolan knew better than anyone how great the price of doing so was. At that time, the slightest carelessness might cause the entire Billowing Wave Academy to be destroyed. I want to go to Nether Prefecture. Jiangchen changed the topic and said, There's a way to save the Grand Ancestor in Nether Prefecture. Nether Prefecture? That place is a land of witchcraft. It's very strange. People from the other prefectures don't want to go to the Nether Prefecture. Bolan said in a deep voice. Moreover, you killed the Nine Li Prince. The Nine Li Prince was the next emperor of the Nine Li dynasty. The Nine Li dynasty was located in the Nether continent. Now, the Nine Li dynasty probably already knew that Jiangchen had killed the Nine Li Prince. If Jiangchen went to the Nether Prefecture now, wouldn't he be courting death? Reincarnation crossing. Jiangchen said. Just these 3 words made Bolan understand why Jiangchen wanted to go to the Nether Prefecture. Reincarnation crossing, the Nether Prefecture's Nine Li dynasty's secret art. According to legend, the reincarnation crossing could bring the dead back to life. Now, looking at the world, other than the immortal Holy Herb, there was only the reincarnation crossing that could save the Blue Sky Confucian scholar. You killed the Nine Li Prince, and now you want to look for the reincarnation crossing. Is the Nine Li dynasty willing to give it to you? Bolan frowned and said, I have my ways. Jiangchen said softly. After saying that, Jiangchen waved his hand, indicating for Bolan to leave. Bolan didn't ask much. After taking a deep look at Jiangchen, she left the bamboo house, closed the door, and stood guard outside the bamboo house. Dean, why waste the eternal azure gold for a person who is about to die? This is a supreme Kui treasure, the base material for forging divine artifacts. As soon as they arrived outside the bamboo house, an elder of the Billow Academy spoke. His expression was calm, but a trace of excitement flashed in his eyes. This was because the Billow Academy was divided into several factions, and this person was the faction that stood opposite of the Blue Sky Confucian scholar. How strong was the Blue Sky Confucian scholar? He alone suppressed everyone until they couldn't breathe. Now that the Blue Sky Confucian scholar was about to die, his opponents were naturally excited and happy. Dean, listen to me. There's no need to waste these things for a person who is about to die. It's better to leave it for the future generations, said a grand elder of the Billow Academy. This person was called Ouyang Sun. In the Billow Academy, his status was equal to the Blue Sky Confucian scholar, and he was also the ancestor of the Ouyang clan. He was very strong, but he was always suppressed by the Blue Sky Confucian scholar. And he was also the Blue Sky Confucian scholar's biggest enemy in the Billow Academy. Am I the dean or are you the dean? Billow's face was gloomy. He had never interfered with the conflicts of the various factions in the Billow Academy. In Billow's eyes, no matter which faction was strong or weak, he only knew that the Blue Sky Confucian scholar was his close friend. So what if he spent a piece of eternal azure gold for his close friend? You and the Blue Sky Confucian scholar have competed for an entire lifetime. Now that you're so old, you still can't let it go. Billow sighed. He stared at Ouyang Sun and asked, Do you have to compete before you're willing to let it go? Compete? There's no need to compete, Ouyang Sun said with a smile. He's about to die, and I'm still alive. We already know who's better. Boom! However, Just as his voice fell, the door of the bamboo house was opened with a loud bang. Then, everyone saw Jiang Chen walk out of the bamboo house with an azure coffin that was taller than a person on his back. In a few steps, Jiang Chen changed his appearance and his aura. Then, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He looked at Ouyang Sun and said coldly, "If the Grand Ancestor isn't dead, what will you do? You're still an ant under the Grand Ancestor's feet. Brat! How dare you talk to me like that? Do you want to die?" Ouyang Sun rebuked angrily. As one of the Grand Elders, even Billow didn't dare to talk to him like that. However, Jiang Chen was fearless. After chuckling, he said, "There will be a day when I return with the Grand Ancestor." After saying that, Jiang Chen didn't speak anymore. He took steady steps, step by step, until he flew into the air and flew into the distance. Outside the bamboo house, a group of people stood in place. Other than Billow, no one knew where Jiang Chen was going. However, they all knew that the coffin on Jiang Chen's back most likely buried the Blue Sky Confucian scholar. "Let him be." Billow waved her hand and said to the people of the Blue Sky clan, "Your Grand Ancestor trusts him. Why can't you trust him? Maybe it's fate." Qin Kongyi sighed and looked in the direction that Jiang Chen left. He asked worriedly, "Should we escort him for a while? What do you think?" Billow pouted. In the current barren state, who would dare to kill Jiang Chen so openly? The Martial Pavilion's branch in the barren state had been intimidated by the Blue Sky Confucian scholar. Now, the Martial Pavilion dared to touch Jiang Chen? At least in the barren state, the Martial Pavilion didn't have the guts. As for the Jiang clan, there was no need to talk about them. Even the Martial Pavilion didn't dare to touch Jiang Chen. How dare the Jiang clan? It could be said that in the current barren state, Jiang Chen could do whatever he wanted. Chapter 340. But she still remembered how many dangers Jiang Chen had run into when he had just been reborn, even though he had shown off his abilities. He had been looking for protection and struggling to rise. Now, in this barren state, how many people of the same generation dared to go against him? How many of those of the older generation dared to do anything in front of him? How many of those sects, families, and inherited forces dared to make a move against Jiang Chen? And all of this, although Jiang Chen had received help from many people, the most important thing was Jiang Chen himself. His tenacious heart, strong bones, and blazing blood had supported him to this point. Sect leader! The sect leader is back! A day later, in Begus City, Qingyan Town, Qianzuan sect. At this moment, Jiang Chen did not disguise himself and stepped into Qianzuan sect with an azure gold coffin on his back. He was going to go far away, and now he was back to look at his home. This was his foundation, and it was also the glory that he had painstakingly built in his previous life, bathed in the blood of his enemies. In this life, Qianzuan sect had declined, but Jiang Chen believed that one day, Qianzuan sect would be able to restore its former glory. Qianzuan sect leader, Lu Qingchen, greets the sect leader. Lu Qingchen hurried over as soon as he got the news. When he saw Jiang Chen, he even knelt down to salute him. Behind him, all the elders and disciples of Qianzuan sect knelt down and shouted, "Greetings, sect leader! After I left, Qianzuan sect has been managed by you. How is Qianzuan sect now?" Jiang Chen asked. "It's only a third-rate sect." Lu Qingchen's eyes flashed with a trace of arrogance. Qingyun Town and Begus City are the leaders of Qianzuan sect. Even the surrounding areas are also the leaders of Qianzuan sect. Third-rate? Jiang Chen frowned and said, "Why is it only third-rate?" Lu Qingchen was stunned for a moment, and suddenly didn't know what to say. After all, it hadn't been long since he took over as the sect leader, but he had developed Qianzuan sect to a third-rate sect. In Lu Qingchen's opinion, this speed was already very fast. Currently, the Qianzuan sect had many high-level alchemists and formation masters, all of whom had been abducted by Jiang Chen. These people had remained in the Qianzuan sect and became the cornerstone of the Qianzuan sect. On top of that, Jiang Chen had given them cultivation methods and martial arts techniques. During this period of time, many experts had emerged from the Qianzuan sect. For example, Lu Qingchen's cultivation had already attained the exalt realm. Compared to the Qianzuan sect of the past, the current Qianzuan sect was developing very well. However, Jiang Chen was not satisfied. If it weren't for the fact that there were too many troublesome matters, this Qianzuan sect would be at least a first-class sect by now if Jiang Chen were to manage it personally. The Martial Pavilion won't accept our Qianzuan sect's promotion mission. Lu Qingchen suddenly smiled bitterly. The Qianzuan sect has been listed as an abnormal sect. Otherwise, Qianzuan sect would have become a second-rate sect. As soon as this was said, Jiang Chen could not help but nod. In his heart he thought that this could not be blamed on Lu Qingchen. After all, the Martial Pavilion had such a deep grudge with him. If the Martial Pavilion did not give the Qianzuan sect the promotion mission, the Qianzuan sect would not be able to advance. In this way, staying in a third-rate sect was considered acceptable. Within a year, I want the Qianzuan sect's name to be known throughout the barren state. Can you do it? Jiang Chen asked. This? Lu Qingchen frowned, unable to agree for a moment. After all, although the barren state could not be compared to the other states, there were still a few top sects and forces in the barren state. To make the Qianzuan sect reach the level of a top sect within a year was too difficult for Lu Qingchen. These are 36 divine-grade cultivation methods and 72 heaven-grade martial arts techniques. Put them in the depository of scriptures and pass them down. Jiang Chen waved his hand and used the power of black and yellow as paper. He had already written these things. Then, Jiang Chen said softly, Amo Xingtian, you stay in the Qianzuan sect. Amo Xingtian, who had not appeared for a long time, had actually been by Jiang Chen's side. His concealment skills were getting better and better, and he had already cultivated the Sunset Demon God's inheritance to the lesser mastery. As soon as Jiang Chen finished speaking, Amo Xingtian revealed himself and nodded at Jiang Chen. Yes, master. From now on, you will deal with the matters on the surface. The Billow Academy will also help. And Mo Xingtian will deal with the matters in the dark, Jiang Chen said. No matter what, within a year, I want the Qianzuan sect to reach the level of a top sect, Jiang Chen said solemnly. All right. Lu Qingchen put away the cultivation methods and martial arts techniques. He finally had confidence in his heart. Then, Jiang Chen walked around the Qianzuan sect and gave Lu Qingchen some pointers before leaving quietly. Just like that, 10 days passed. 10 days later, in front of a vast sea, Jiang Chen stood on the surface of the sea with the azure gold coffin on his back. Beside him, Jianglu, Nailan Mayer, Hualiani, Baifingyu, Wakako, Xiao Qingyi, and the others stood side by side. Jiang Chen had transmitted his voice to them, telling them that he was going to the nether continent. These people had come together to see him off. Everyone has their own aspirations and destiny. Jiang Chen looked into the distance and said, Aspirations can change, but they can't be broken. Destiny can be followed, but it can also be violated. Everyone has to walk their own path. From now on, you can walk your own path, Jiang Chen said. Boss, will you come back? Jiang Lu looked at Jiang Chen in a daze. He said, Can I accompany you to the Nether Prefecture? I'll go too, Wakako said. I'm going to go out and explore. I want to experience it. However, Jiang Chen directly refused, because he knew that this trip to the Nether Continent would not bode well for him. He did not know how much danger he would have to go through, and even death. Jianglu and the others had their own lives, and they had their own paths to walk. Jiang Chen did not want them to follow him, and he did not want them to live in his shadow. These people were all geniuses, and they should have their own paths, and they should have their own glory. Master, why don't we go to White Sovereign City first? Baifengyu said gently. This is the Blue Mountain Snow Sea, and White Sovereign City is in the middle of the sea. After that is the Nether Continent. All right. Jiang Chen nodded. White Sovereign City was very close to the Nether Continent, and he knew more about the Nether Continent. He could go to White Sovereign City to inquire about the nether continent. Master! I will miss you! Nayland Mayer blinked her beautiful eyes. Her eyes were as gentle as water, and there was a hint of charm in them. She slowly walked to Jiang Chen's side and whispered, "When can I not call you master?" How could Jiang Chen not know what Nayland Mayer was thinking? His face darkened, and he rolled his eyes. He said angrily, "The sadness of parting is all gone after hearing what you said. I allow you to take in concubines." Huayanyi suddenly jumped out and said domineeringly, "But I'm the main wife. I'm the boss. Damn it. Sisters, I'm parting with you now, can you not do this?" Jiang Chen was speechless, and he thought that they could not be serious for more than 3 minutes. The good atmosphere of parting was directly ruined by these 3 women with just a few words. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.